pickup times. We know that a lot of schools in Merri-bek really struggle with congestion. We also know that a lot of families want to walk or ride to school, but the dangerous zones outside the school gates often push people away from making that choice. So it's really about just creating a really hyper-safe, sustainable, healthy space in front of schools.
It's been absolutely brilliant. The kids are loving coming to school on Tuesdays. There's a real vibe and a sense of, joy when we start the day together. Lots of families are starting to come back. Our student attendance has increased on the days that we have open streets, and also we have less lateness as well. So it's just been brilliant all around.
We don't normally walk, we normally drive, so it's a really good incentive to get parents that don't normally do it, doing it. Once we're out and walking, they really enjoy it. It's so much safer. The kids love coming in here, playing, drawing with chalk.
This has been probably the highlight. Parents are saying, wow, can we do this more often, which has been fantastic. To see the joy on the kids' faces and to hear them saying, wanting to ride their bikes and wanting to have a play on the street's been amazing.
We have a huge percentage of our students riding to school. You can just see how successful it is. We've got kids riding, parents coming along, just really enjoying themselves. And it's changed my thinking. For someone who drove to work, bought my own bike and riding to work each day, it's amazing.
It's a fun experience. I normally walk, but today everyone's doing it, so I might as well join in.
It's also an initiative that residents and the local community can take part in. We want to see people coming out, having a coffee, we want to see people talking to their neighbours, and it's been really fantastic to partner with Bicycle Network and the schools to run these initiatives and really see, some healthy, happy street space.
Being part of Open Streets has been really exciting. We're interested in making people view their neighbourhood streets in a different way, being spaces for everyone and multi-use spaces, not just for throughways for cars.
Just listen to all this noise. It's great having everyone have so much fun around you and just being active. No, we're really stoked. We should happen every day.
This is very attractive for parents and kids to spend together. I think it's encouraging people to ride to the school.
I think it's definitely a good idea to get people active and getting people involved with the community. Because of this, it got a lot of me and my friends to ride to school every day. I get to see all my friends and talk to new people.
My name is Angelica Panopoulos and I'm your new Mayor of Merri-bek City Council. I'm a lifelong local. I've just finished uni, so I'm a law grad. I'm an activist and I've been a councillor for 2 years now. So today we are along the Moonee Ponds Creek in Glenroy, and this is somewhere where I've come ever since I was a little kid with my family, with my dog, down for walks by the creek and played in the park, and I've got lots of fun memories here. There's a lot to love about Merri-bek. I think the fact that we've got such a diverse, eclectic mix of people here who call this area home and who all care about this area is something that really sets us apart and makes me quite proud to be from this area. So my spare time's been a bit limited up until now. I do like just to see my friends, to relax, read a good book and to get out and to see new things. It's hard to choose just one or two of my favourite places in Merri-bek. I think most important is wherever I am with my friends or my family and having a good time, that's where I like to be. Also had some great times just sitting in Coburg Mall and having chats with people, and so really anywhere where there's a bit of energy and a bit of life happening, I think it's quite fun to be around there. There's a few big challenges facing Merri-bek right now. In terms of broader challenges, I think we need to work together to bring the community with us on particular journeys, say to reconciliation, to other forms of equality that we need to have happen in our community. As the Mayor of Merri-bek, I hope to achieve a few things. I hope that first and foremost, we can make council seem a lot more accessible to people, and as though this isn't something that you have to wait until you're much older to do or until you've got X amount of years of work experience. I think making it quite clear to people that this is council, it belongs to you as much as it belongs to me, and so we should all get involved, and I really want that to be the overriding, message throughout this mayoral year.
Well, they did putting the solar panel on top of the roof. It looks beautiful, and what is important is knowing the help that it could for us for our energy efficiency. I saw everyone here in our neighborhood is putting solar, so I said to myself, I will think about it. I will not lose anything, so I choose to put it, and that makes a difference. It helps us when we receive the bill now. We saw the difference from the usual amount that we paid, so it went down, and I think it will help us. The money that is being not paid before, we can use it with other things, and I think the overall help of that solar being installed in our roof is really to save some money and also helping the climate change. And it will really make a difference for the earth, in a way, it is helping us. So I will recommend, don't hesitate to put this solar panel in your roof. It is a big difference to have it.
Pedestrians and bike riders, including a large and growing number of Coburg High School students, are at risk every day on and around Coburg's Bell Street Bridge at the Nicholson and Elizabeth Street intersection.
The area is notorious for traffic accidents. Recently, a Coburg High School student was injured by a car while walking in the area.
Footpaths on the Bell Street Bridge are significantly narrower than other bridges in the area, yet the Bell Street Bridge carries more traffic than almost any other road in Merri-bek, 47,000 vehicles a day. The narrow paths, along with high volumes of cars, trucks and buses, pose an unacceptable risk to safety and accessibility in our communities.
We know that more than 1,000 people walk and wheel across the bridge on weekdays, just in the morning and afternoon peak periods. Even more use the bridge during the day and on weekends. We also know that students are worried about walking and cycling across the bridge. And for many, it's their only way to and from school, or to access the after-school activities and shops.
I've heard lots of horror stories about near misses and things like that, but most of what I see is just less than a metre in between the pedestrians and the cars, and 3 lanes of traffic going as fast as they want. It's really not a secure space because there's no separation in between the traffic, which is loud and fast, and the footpath where usually school kids are walking across.
I use the Bell Street Bridge almost every day, maybe 4 times a week, and it just makes me feel very unsafe. I myself have had terrible experiences on the bridge.
The thing is, I haven't seen one. I've actually been in an accident. We were just like traffic, waiting for the green light, and then out of nowhere, pow, the back of the car just gets slammed into by another one. We practically jump out of our seats.
It's one of the main connections to get me home, so yeah, I have to use it on a daily basis. I've seen some near misses. I've been in a few near misses myself, especially around the little island in front of the service station.
So I was actually involved in a car accident myself. It was in the rain, a lady lost control of her van and actually went into the barricade. So I got pulled back from that and then had to pull one of the ladies out of the car. I was probably in year 9. So that was pretty traumatic and pretty scary to see. That kind of put me off using the bridge, especially by myself. It's very small and it's especially after school and before school, there's lots of kids going to and forth, especially because there's a 7-Eleven there. So it can be pretty packed, and obviously after school traffic makes it really, really hard. They've already implemented different lower limits, but in a sense that doesn't really change anything because not everyone follows the rules. Our school has lots of active transport modes. We use the bike paths and things that surround the Bell Street Bridge, including Merri Creek. There's kids coming to and from every single day, and I think that it's super important that we make that environment more safer and more easily accessible for students of all ages.
That is why we're asking all parties to commit $250,000 to investigate and design safe and accessible active travel options over Coburg's Bell Street Bridge. We need this investigation to be completed urgently within the next 12 months.
We're ready for all levels of government to work together with the community to promote safe, active travel for the current and future students of Coburg High School and the communities of Merri-bek and Darebin cities. To show your support, visit change.org and sign the No More Accidents in the Bell Street Risk Zone petition.
I had insulation put up on the top of the roof. It was a good thing to do. When I read the ad in your local paper, and it said, you know, it does help, and the lady was very happy. And I said, if she's happy, I think I will be happy too. And yeah, I think it's the best thing that I came up with. The difference that it's made, it's comfortable, especially in summer. I hate summer, yeah. Winter I can put a jacket on, but summer it's terrible for me. So this, you know, keeps everything down, nice and clean, comfortable for the summer. I have to go through the winter, but I think it will be just as good. Yeah, just have it done. The people who actually...
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone in the gallery hear me? Can I get a thumbs up if people can hear me in the gallery? All right, so you guys can't hear me. Adam, can you hear me? Thanks, Adam. Great. Okay, so we'll try that again. Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Angelica Panopoulos, and I'm the Mayor of Merri-bek City Council, and I'm also the chairperson for tonight's council meeting. Okay, no, you can't hear me. All right.
It's faint, it could probably be turned up.
All right. Is it better if I bring it that much? Okay. Yeah, we're fixing that, Sue. Yeah, I've also got that, Sue. Okay, thank you, Sue. All right, let's get into the meeting. So let's try that third time lucky. My name is Angelica Panopoulos, and I'm the Mayor of Merri-bek City Council, and I am the chairperson of tonight's council meeting. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our meeting this evening. So we're meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, and we wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners and custodians of these lands and waterways, and would also like to pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to all First Nations communities who significantly contribute to the life of this city. This council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website, Facebook and YouTube. And this recording will also be available as video on demand. Attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. A reminder that as councillors, we'll act in accordance with the Councillor Code of Conduct, which will support the principles of leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. I also want to start off this meeting by saying that Merri-bek Council is an inclusive place, and we want to make sure that everyone in our community can be safe and welcomed at our council meetings. This is something that we really pride ourselves on. So this is to say that we won't be tolerating offensive comments, and so this is the formal warning that if there are any offensive, threatening, abusive comments made by people in the gallery, I will ask that you leave this council meeting, or security may also request that you leave. In the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. For members of the gallery and councillors attending in person, please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thank you in advance for your understanding and your cooperation. So I'd like to introduce the other councillors in attendance tonight. We've got Councillor Helen Davidson, our Deputy Mayor. Councillor Lambros Tapanos.
Good evening.
Councillor James Conlon.
Hi everyone.
Councillor Adam Pulford.
Hi everyone.
Councillor Mark Riley.
Good evening.
Councillor Monica Hart. Councillor Oscar Yildiz. And Councillor Sue Bolton. And we don't have any councillors approved to attend tonight's meeting online. I'll also just introduce the Acting Chief Executive Officer, Anita Kono, who's to my right, and the senior management team who are around us.
In terms of apologies, Councillor Pavlidis is on an approved leave of absence until the 24th of September 2023. Are there any other apologies from councillors? No? Okay, and in terms of another leave of absence, Councillor Carly Hannon has requested a leave of absence from the 6th of September 2023 to the 28th of September 2023. Councillors, could I please have a motion for that? Councillor Pulford to move, Councillor Riley to second. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. I'll now move on to disclosures of conflicts of interest. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest to declare? And if you have any, please state the item that you've got the conflict on and the nature of it. No? All right. So up to item 3 now, which is the confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Councillors, could I please have a motion for the confirmation of the minutes from the council meeting held on the 9th of August 2023? Councillor Hart to move, Councillor Riley to second. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. Councillors, so we've now confirmed the minutes and we'll move on to acknowledgements and other matters. Provision of up to 10 minutes is provided for councillors to acknowledge and recognise the achievements of local individuals and organisations and to raise matters that are considered important to council that are not already listed in the meeting agenda. Councillors, are there any acknowledgements or other matters that you'd like to raise? Councillor Bolton?
I would like to raise one issue, which is an event coming up this Sunday. There is a community rally to call for accessible tram stops on Sydney Road before the upfill line gets closed for level crossing removal in Brunswick. The details of the rally are this Sunday, 17th of September, 1 p.m. at the corner of Wilson Avenue and Sydney Road, opposite Barclay Square Shopping Centre. It's an event that council is supporting, and it is particularly important because as soon as the upfill train line closes for level crossing removal, there'll be no accessible public transport in this corridor, and it'll affect people right up the line, not just in the Brunswick area. It'll affect people right up and down the line. And there's also a feeling amongst disability groups that if we can win accessible tram stops in Sydney Road, then we can win it on other tram lines. In Merri-bek, we've got 2 other tram lines without accessible stops as well, but most of Melbourne is not accessible for trams. So anyway, I just encourage people to come along if you're able to.
Great, thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Riley?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I have a couple of things to speak to. One is I want to acknowledge the passing of Uncle Brian McKinnon, who passed away on the 20th of July 2023. Uncle Brian was an Amunu Wandai country of those countries and ancestry. He grew up in Geraldton, Western Australia, in a fringe camp, interestingly named Bloody Ellie, at the foot of an interestingly named mountain called Mount Misery. He left home at the age of 12 to work along Western Australia's coast wherever he could, and at 18 he settled in Geelong, Victoria, and that's where the story begins for Merri-bek, because he's exhibited widely since 1996, but tonight in our agenda we actually recognise the acquisition of another one of his works as an Aboriginal elder and as a First Nations communities artist who's deeply embedded in Victoria and Australia's arts community. Uncle Brian McKinnon was the inaugural Vice-Chancellor's pre-doctoral Indigenous Fellow at RMIT's School of Art, which recognises him as a widely respected champion of Aboriginal rights and an innovative contemporary painter. And you'll see at the Governance Report tonight at 7:16 that the acquisition of his work, Bushfire 1, Red Gum Sleeper, will strengthen our First Nations art component of the Merri-bek art collection, and the acquisition will also complement another work of his called Scars 2008, which the Merri-bek art collection came into possession of some time ago. So just want to acknowledge the passing of Uncle Brian and say Vale Uncle Brian McKinnon. On another sad note, I want to also acknowledge Fraser Brindley, who passed away on the 9th of August 2023. Fraser was the first elected Greens councillor to the Merri-bek city, formerly known as Moreland. Fraser was a bright, brilliant, intelligent person who was able to work with councillors of other colours. He was instrumental in the establishment of the business incubator in Victoria Street, 420 Victoria Street, Brunswick, and it's now known as the Brunswick Design and Innovation Centre. It's where we host lots of startups and business enterprises. It's one way of supporting the industry and business in our community. Fraser went on to become a Greens councillor of the City of Melbourne. He went on to do much other work. He moved to Tasmania, eventually out of Brunswick, and he worked as an advisor to MPs, including people like Senator Wish Wilson from Tasmania. He leaves behind 4 children, and many of us were very shocked and really saddened at the loss of this young man, Vale Fraser Brindley. Lastly, on a more positive note, I want to note that the Uluru Statement from the Heart's being an action from a couple of recent motions in our minutes and other things, but people can find placards around the Voice, and namely in favour of the yes vote for the Constitution. You can see them up the end of the chamber. You're out there tonight, and you can find them all our reception centres and libraries throughout Merri-bek. They're free, and just letting you know. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Riley. Are there any other acknowledgements or other matters that councillors wish to raise? If not, we'll move on to petitions. So there are no petitions listed in the agenda tonight, but I do want to acknowledge that we have received some more additional signatures to a petition that was submitted, to a petition that was received at the July meeting. The petition received in July requests Council remove unsafe bike infrastructure on Kent Road, Pascoe Vale, and an additional 97 signatures were submitted this morning and will be added to that original petition received back in July. Councillors, are there any petitions to be tabled on behalf of residents? If not, we'll move on to questions of council and community statements. So the time provided for questions and statements is 30 minutes, and this time can only be extended by another 30 minutes by resolution of council. If we do not have the time to answer your question, it will be taken on notice and responded to in writing. Priority will be given to questions and statements that relate to matters listed in the agenda. If time allows, questions about items other than those listed on the agenda will be considered. A maximum of 2 questions or statements in any combination is allowed per person, and questions or statements that relate to a matter listed in the agenda will be dealt with first. If you've registered to ask a question, when I invite you, you or your representative must state your name and your suburb and then ask your question with preamble or background for up to 3 minutes. If you've registered to make a statement, when I invite you, you or your representative must state your name and your suburb and then make your statement without taking longer than 3 minutes. If you've submitted a second question or indicated that you have a second statement, it may, at my discretion, be deferred until all other persons who have submitted questions have asked their first one, or it may not be asked if time doesn't allow for it. A maximum of 3 questions will be heard on any one subject, and then we'll proceed to the next topic. If time allows, we'll return back to the previous topic. So I'll either answer the question on behalf of council or invite another councillor to answer it. Alternatively, I'll ask the Chief Executive Officer to provide a response or to refer it to another council officer. In relation to a statement, there will be no response or discussion. As detailed in the governance rules, questions or statements may be disallowed if they are defamatory, indecent, abusive, offensive, irrelevant, trivial, or objectionable in language or substance. And if a response to your question is provided at tonight's meeting, there will be no further formal response. But Council will action any commitments made in answering the question. So with that, we will commence question time at 7:16 and go straight to item 7.1, which is on the conclusion of Kent Road separated bike lane trial and next steps for Coburg to Glenroy bike route. Now, I believe we've got Bernard here in person to give one statement. All good. No worries. Microphone's on. Is there a green light?
There you go.
Perfect. You've got 3
Can
minutes,
everyone hear?
Bernard.
Okay, yeah. Bernard from Brunswick. This is a statement from the Sustainable Transport Advisory Committee on item 7.1. Council required us to amend it. This is a shortened version, but councillors have the full statement. STAC is absolutely opposed to Council removing the Kent Road protected bike lanes and relying instead on an unsafe shimmy. STAC is profoundly disappointed that Council officers failed to seek our advice prior to making this decision. What is the point of a Sustainable Transport Advisory Committee if not to provide advice on safe walking and cycling infrastructure decision-making? The officer recommendations are contrary to Council's policies on active transport and the Council plan. The planning scheme clearly outlines a road user hierarchy that prioritizes walking, cycling, and the use of public transport over cars. Protected bike lanes are vital for the safety of people riding and to keep footpaths safe for people walking. The report identifies poor driver behavior on Kent Road, yet it recommends removal of the protected bike lanes that keep people safe. Council plans to build an unprotected shimmy route on back streets, but people will always need to ride down Kent Road to access services. Many will now ride on the footpath. If these bike lanes are ripped out, it will severely damage Merri-bek's proud reputation on sustainability. It will undermine plans to build protected bike lanes across the whole state. Because if Merri-bek can't do it, who else can? And it will empower those people who are trying to stop safe active transport so cars can continue monopolizing the road space. We are facing a climate emergency. We cannot delay taking strong action on sustainable transport. We have a rising population and a cost of living crisis. Safe cycling infrastructure is vital to meet these imperatives. The parliamentary inquiry on vulnerable road users heard much evidence about the need for protected bike lanes. Road safety authorities were alarmed at the number of distracted drivers, with the majority admitting to speeding and using a handheld mobile phone. Merri-bek urgently needs safe protected bike lanes to ensure we all can choose to ride. Protected bike lanes are vital to pedestrian safety. Without protected bike lanes, many will cycle and scoot on the footpaths. The effect on elderly residents will be devastating, and being startled by an e-scooter can lead to falls, sometimes with terrible consequences. Kent Road is an ideal location for protected bike lanes to ensure that residents are safe while walking and cycling. Reducing the street width to one lane of traffic is a vital traffic calming measure. After seeing this report, STAC members declared that they do not have confidence that Council will help deliver active transport infrastructure in Merri-bek.
Thanks,
Councillors,
Bernard. If you could, last sentence.
Councillors, please retain this vital piece of infrastructure and reaffirm Council's commitment to building a safe, separated bike network.
Great. Thank you, Bernard. Thanks. Okay, next up, we've got Pauline Carmichael, who is here in person with the statement. Thanks, Pauline.
Good evening. My name is Pauline Carmichael from Pascoe Vale. I hope that tonight's report on Kent Road trial is considered in its own right and according to the very clear Council resolution. It should not be embroiled in the broader community's opinion and sometimes dissatisfaction of Council's distribution of budget, all its policies or projects. This is a safety issue of a trial, and it's too serious to not hear genuinely affected members of the community and the evidence supporting the officer's recommendation. In today's newspapers, Councillor Pulford has claimed that the latest survey was flawed. Wow, we have been saying for 2.5 years the consultation and surveys have been flawed, but flawed in a way that was always biased to keeping these lanes regardless of safety. This last survey was anonymous, so who knows if genuinely completed, and only asked if bike riders felt safe. Didn't even ask pedestrians if they feel safe in the congested mess, nor motorists and the impact of reduced sight lines turning into Kent Road from the intersections. Even a small car accident can be enough to kill an elderly person. As to those people who say the medical centre is a private business and the road shouldn't be used for patients to park on, I really have no words. Everyone has a right to access medical care, and this is the best asset in the area. Merri-bek's own planning scheme refers to having accessible public and private transport and adequate car parking for staff and visitors of health facilities. There has never been an option in surveys to say remove the trial. However, over 4,000 people have asked for its removal due to safety concerns that have been created affecting all users and their movement. 4,000 is more than the number who voted for the new name Merri-bek. If you're worried about climate change and the impact if this 300-metre trial is removed, the number of vehicles using the road has not changed over this lengthy time. Councillors have had ample time to investigate further if there are any specific barriers to people choosing other transport options to driving. Some might say that Kent Road pre-trial was less safe now than that it is now for bike riders. My arguments are, at the very first engagement session, I spoke to a prominent member of the Merri-bek Bug User Group and asked, was this section of Kent Road unsafe? The answer was no, and she frequently rode down Kent Road to get to Derby Street for lunch. If there was football on the weekend, she would avoid Kent Road, and when I asked what about now with the bike lane, she said she would still avoid Kent Road on the weekend if there was sport on. The average speed was under 40 kilometres pre-trial, so whoever came up with the idea it was a rat run was wrong. There was no advocacy that any further traffic calming measures were required. The argument of cars roaring down the middle of a wide road is perception, not reality. Bike riders who previously rode on the road and continue to ride on the road were safer pre-trial as there was plenty of space to ride in the car lane and a good distance from car doors. Children are still on the footpath, which is the best place for them. A council report said that 42% more female bike riders rode on Kent Road post-trial.
Thanks, Pauline. If you could just wrap it up soon.
Female, it actually was 2 per day, so 42% obviously sounds better. The total number decreased by 8%. I could go on and on. There's 375 pedestrians compared to about 50 a day. Bike riders, thousands of vulnerable people impacted, and bike riders are vulnerable road users as well, and near misses have been reported from reversing cars from driveways and particularly at the Joffa Street intersection.
Thanks. Thank you, Pauline, for coming in. Thank you. Okay, so next up we have Rory, who is online and joining us now.
Sorry, was that for me?
Yes, so we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Sorry, I was watching the live stream and must have been a bit delayed. All right.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, my question to the councillors is, how can we ensure the safety of cyclists and other road users without this dedicated lane, considering the documented instances of dangerous and aggressive driving, such as aggressive refusals to give way to oncoming cars, heated arguments between drivers and cyclists, and reports of side-swiped mirrors and vehicle damage?
Thanks, Rory. We might go to our Director or Acting Director of City Infrastructure, Greg Rodwell, to answer that.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So Council is committed to a 10-year active travel capital plan, which includes protected bike lane projects along with a range of other bike and pedestrian infrastructure projects. We also have non-infrastructure based initiatives like our Ride and Stride program, where we work with local schools to encourage safe, healthy travel options for kids. This part of a multi-dimensional approach to creating safe and sustainable transport options for all people of all abilities. So in terms of the reports of aggressive driver behaviour and driver frustration on Kent Road during the trial period have been noted by officers. This has primarily been attributed to the single lane road width, which will be reinstated to the original condition if the recommendation of officers is adopted, and will not require vehicles to swerve and give way to other oncoming vehicles on the street. Traffic calming devices will remain in the street to help achieve the 40km/h speed limit. In providing a low-stress bike route between Glenroy and Coburg continues to be a strategy to facilitate safe, convenient and attractive cycling options for all confidence levels. The recommendation proposes an alternative alignment to the Glenroy to Coburg bike route that is expected to provide safe and comfortable bike riding options for everyone.
Thanks, Greg, and thank you, Rory. Thanks. Next, we've got Marion Atwater, who is here in person with a statement.
Hi, thank you. I'm Marion Atwater from Pascoe Vale. I live on one of the Pascoe Vale shimmy routes. So I have a statement. There were 1,083 responses to the survey that was conducted in April. That consisted of 123 on-site intercept surveys, 82 physical mail-out surveys, and 878 responses via the online survey. The survey was not limited to only those in the immediate vicinity of Kent Road. It was open to all, which was something that we were critical of at the time because we believed that it would enable the bicycle users group to unfairly dominate the survey responses. We have watched council officers give every possible advantage to retaining the bike lanes over the past 2 years. But it seems that in spite of the open nature of the survey, the overwhelming response via the various questions and open text fields is that the bike lanes are flawed and should be removed. To quote from page 12 of the officer's report, which says, "While there is some positive data from the Kent Road trial, the strength of the negative responses and challenges identified with trial treatments indicate that less confident bike riders may be better served on an alternative route." And also to quote, "When a transport project interrupts regular traffic patterns, it is common for travel behaviours to adjust over time to suit the new network arrangements. However, in this case, ongoing traffic volumes and behaviours that were expected to lessen over the 2-year trial period have instead prevailed. This unexpected side effect of the trial treatments also suggests that alternative options to the trial infrastructure should be pursued." End quote. Unfortunately, though, it seems that a councillor or some councillors who are disappointed with the results of the survey and the trial generally have instead suggested that there should be a last-minute contest to see which side can write the most emails and make the most phone calls to councillors, and that councillors should base their decision on the number of emails and phone calls that they receive in the days leading up to tonight's meeting. This seems like a grossly unfair tactic. I hope that the majority of councillors will see past this unfair tactic and instead base their decision on the 1,083 responses to the survey that was open to all. The member for Pascoe Vale, Anthony Cianfloni MP, has written to councillors with suggestions, including leveraging the $1.25 million state government funding for a coal reserve master plan in order to explore alternative bike route options. Other local councils and Vic roads have removed separated bike lanes because the bike lanes created more problems and safety issues than they solved, which is exactly the situation with Kent Road in Pascoe Vale, as shown in the various road safety audit reports. Thank you.
Thanks, Marion. So next up on our agenda is item 7.2, which is the Coburg Bluestone Cottage Complex redevelopment. And I'll see if we've got Marilyn Moore here in person with a question. No, we don't.
She's running late.
Okay.
She arrived later because she knew there are other controversial.
All good. If we have Marilyn at the end, we'll bring her back in. So we'll move then on to item 7.4, which is the 2023 to 2030 Arts and Culture Strategy. And first, I believe we've got Gemma O'Donoghue from Coburg High with a question in person.
Hi, I'm Gemma O'Donoghue and I live in Coburg, previously established. I'm in year 8 at Coburg High School, and in the past 2 years I've participated in both school productions as well as an instrumental music concert. For both school productions, we had to perform shows 4 nights in a row due to the lack of seating, so everyone's family members could get to come and see performances. This led to a lot of students really burnt out and exhausted at the end, and while we all loved what we did, it would all prefer if we didn't have to do it 4 times. And the instrumental music concert, we had numerous extra rows of seats added, and still that wasn't enough, with many sitting on the floor or in their wings just to be able to witness some of their family members and friends performing. So my question to the council is, what is council doing to provide an accessible, welcoming community performance space similar to the Darebin Arts Centre as part of this draft Arts Merri-bek strategy?
Sorry, thank you for the question. I see Councillor Pulford's got his hand up.
Thank you for coming in and for your question. A couple of councillors, I believe Councillor Bolton and myself have talked with a couple of members of the school council, and our arts and culture strategy that's on the agenda tonight. We've created a couple of amendments to ask for council officers to look in how we could create something like the Darebin Performing Arts Centre here in Merri-bek. So we'll get a report back on some of those options. Based on chats with some of the people in the school council, we're going to also look at what modifications that could include modifications to our town hall, given it's close to your school, and I think your school sometimes uses it at the moment. And also they're going to look at having a formal heads of agreement with your school, because I know your school generously offers up other facilities for community groups to use. So hopefully those amendments pass tonight, and because of your question here tonight and also the conversations with your school council and their community's advocacy, hopefully we can start these things getting in motion. It might take some time, but things got to start somewhere. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Samantha Bond, also from Coburg High, with a question.
Hi there, Samantha Bond from Coburg, and I'd like to start with my question and then I'll follow on with a little bit of an explanation, if that's okay. So my question is that we're referring to item 7.4 in the agenda, and in particular section 3.11 of the draft Merri-bek Arts and Culture Strategy, commencement of planning for Arts Centre in the north of the municipality. My question is, what is meant by an arts centre in this clause, i.e. is it just a gallery or a workshop, or whether this includes planning for a much-needed community performing arts centre? And as you just heard from Gemma, I'm a parent member of the Coburg High School Council. I'm also the chair of the Coburg High Engagement Group, and we've long been pursuing the goal of an appropriate-sized performing arts centre for our kids. In particular, for the students, we have a lot of students who are studying music and drama and dance, and there's no appropriate-sized space in the school. But if it is the latter, in my question to you, if there is actually a plan afoot to create a performing arts centre, we really would love to see some collaborations between Merri-bek Council and Coburg High School. We're obviously lacking the space, but we also know that as a community space, like other parts of our school, as was identified by Councillor Pulford, we want to share. We're part of the community, we're centrally located, and we would like very much for alternatives to be made available, not only for students like Gemma, who desperately want to perform and their families can't come and see them in the school space, and it becomes very difficult, but also for the broader community who are very engaged with both the school curriculum and the arts in general. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Eamon?
Thank you, Mayor, through you, and thanks, Samantha, for your question. So the strategy that's before Council tonight talks to a northern arts hub. That's when we talk about the north, we're talking north of Bell Street, so really Faulkner, Hadfield, and Glenroy, possibly, but we don't have a site listed for that. The intention for that, and it is really early days and embryotic, if you like, is for an indoor performance space but also space for creative production. The size of that facility, what it looks like, what the community needs, all needs to be fleshed out through consultation with artists, but also with the wider community. And that's going to be done in the coming years.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next up we've got Nadabu from Coburg High as well, and of course a former Merri-bek councillor and mayor.
Hi, legends. Thanks for being councillors. Obviously, well, I'm the this year's school council president at Coburg High, and obviously we're here about your arts strategy this evening. It's really important for me, especially, to acknowledge how incredible the visual arts collection is in this city. We have tons of beautiful galleries and visual art performance display spaces, and the festivals that the city put on are, second to none. That's not a secret. But we are here because we're concerned about performance art. And so while the city is home to artists of all mediums, as young performers are in our hub down there at the high school and are really hemmed in by the situation they find themselves in with their own performance space at the school, and our options in the city are fairly limited. So, you know what the situation is with the Brunswick Mechanics Institute. It's, even if it was more available to the public, it's quite tiny. And so obviously what we're asking is that if you are able to add an extra point to your motion regarding the draft strategy, that you would please all support it, and that the council will help us in our campaign, but also to achieve a scenario for young performers who are learning to perform at the school, to have another place for them to display their works. There's currently 200 instrumental music students at the school every week, and that's only music. So the school's growing exponentially. We're at about 1,200 people now, and expect more next year. And there are science people, and there are maths people, and there are literature people, but there are lots of performers down there. The city has always been home to lots of performers. So we hope that you can support that, and that part of exploring options for what an MOU might look like can also include opportunities for the council to attract any type of funding to maybe retrofit the town hall so that it's, in better state to accommodate everyone who's performing in the city. So I guess the question is, would you please all support it? You could just say yes.
I might have to take that as a rhetorical question, and we'll wait and see. So thanks, Nat. Thank you. It was a rhetorical question, really. In debate, you can do that, I'm sure. Okay, so next up we've got item 7.6, which is summer 2023 to 24 sports ground tenancy allocations. And I believe we've got Julie Webb here in person with a question. Or we don't, that's okay. I have seen actually that I think we do have Marilyn, who's just popped in now, and that her question, of course, was on item 7.2, Coburg Bluestone Cottage Complex redevelopment. Marilyn, if you wanted to hop in and ask your question, feel free to do so. Yep.
Very sorry, a long walk.
No worries at all.
Okay, so this is the second time I have come to these meetings to argue in favour of a suitably sized building to augment space occupied by Coburg Historical Society, which I remind you is 51 years old and growing community organisation and user of the Bluestone Cottage complex for over 40 years. We're not here asking for a fourth building. As I said last time, I was here on the 19th of August. We're questioning the officer's recommendation for the area and budget of a replacement building to our annex, resulting from Council's decision to sell land to the east and north of the State Heritage listed Bluestone Cottage complex, including land on which the annex sits. A replacement building for our current annex building was hopefully an opportunity to keep our collection of artefacts, records and images safer, provide more efficient answers to historical inquiries with all our records consolidated in one building, have a small research area, a workspace and kitchenette to attract more volunteers who would work in a newer, better, more fit-for-purpose building over extended opening hours. We thought we would like also a multiple historical Coburg displays as well in the building, and a little administration space, an accessible toilet for all volunteers and visitors, which we don't have now. So the officer recommendation is for the cheapest option, concept 1, and it's only as large as our present annex with a DDA toilet. The building will not accommodate our current collection, provide a kitchenette for our volunteers, and will not give us sufficient space for an expansion. An extension would be required almost immediately. The second option is only 140 square metres internally and 155 square metres when measured outside. It gives only 30 square metres extra internal space, which would be quickly used up with new records and new donations. If we have a kitchenette and toilet for the disabled, it would be in that one. However, we doubt we'll be able to fit in any artefact displays at the workroom or more storage. So my question is one that comes from one of our members, and she advises that $8,000 per square metre is about the current cost per square metre of a high-end bespoke architectural residential project. And option 3, which is barely mentioned in the council report, suggests that the square meterage would be $7,796 dollars per square metre. That's a whopping $4,200 per square metre more than option 1, and it is $3,532 per square metres more than option 2. So she makes the observation that the other rates for option 1 and 2 are also high for a commercial project. So the question is, why are those costs so high? And why in particular does option 3 differ so significantly?
Thanks, Marilyn. I'll go to Eamon as the relevant director on that one.
Thanks, Mayor, through you. Thanks, Marilyn, for your question. With most council projects, and particularly council projects of this size, we have external quantity surveyors develop costings for those sort of projects, and that's what we've done in this case. So people who deal with the cost of buildings each and every day and gather costs based on a whole range of projects have developed these costs. So they're very much a reflection of what's happening in the industry, and we know that across Victoria the cost of building has escalated significantly, both in terms of labour and materials, and we're feeling that across all of our projects. So that could be why you're feeling that those costs are high. The difference between option 1 and 2, option 1 and 2, there's the kitchenette in there. Option 3, of course, brings a whole different level of use and occupation of the building, which flips that design into a different requirement under the Building Code of Australia, and is more expensive to deliver for things like ventilation, lighting, etc. So that's the key difference in cost.
Great. Thanks, Eamon, and thank you, Marilyn. So I will just request an extension of time for question time for another half hour. I've got Councillor Pulford to move, Councillor Riley to second. All those in favour? Great. That is carried. So we are now up to item 7.9, naming of laneways, and I believe that we've got Irini Pilipasides here in person with a statement if she wishes to come on in. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Irini Pilipasides and I'm from Brunswick. I am the daughter of Pagoni and Stavros Pilipasides. Firstly, I wish to thank you all, the officer's recommendation to request the naming of this laneway in honour of my deceased mother, Pagoni, for her hard work, dedication and major contribution to the community. The name Pagoni is strongly linked to this nameway, as this nameway adjoins the 576 Sydney Road, Brunswick premises where Pagoni lived and spent most of her life for countless hours working around the clock in her field in fashion and textiles. In 1961, Pagoni and Stavros migrated with their 2 children from Greece to Melbourne, Australia, on a ship called Patrice, with no money and with no English language. The family has been residing in Brunswick since that time in 1961. Brunswick was to become the centre of the Greek community in the 60s, 70s and 80s. The community was thriving, and this was perfect for Pagoni, as she was a qualified fashion designer and seamstress from Athens, and she had plenty of work and always in demand. In 1970, Stavros and Pagoni purchased and began living with their 2 children at their 576 Sydney Road premises, which adjoins, as I said before, with the laneway on Sydney Road. The entrance door to their home is in this laneway, which has become a significant part of the family's history and everyday life. It's through this laneway access that the family enters and leaves their home for over 53 years. Pagoni always maintained and kept this laneway clean, as she would say, it's part of the family home. It was a perfect location for the family, as Stavros's brother, Nick, was 5 doors down running his business Green Hill Restaurant and Function Centre. His other brother, George, was 5 doors up running his grocery store, and his other brother, Jim, was 100 metres away running his restaurant named Olympic. It was an exciting time for migrants to be in Brunswick in those days. There were many Greeks, Italians and people from many other cultures everywhere. The culture was changing. In 1971, tragically, Stavros had a sudden heart attack and suddenly died at the age of 44 years old. Pagoni was left a widow at the age of 42 years old to bring up her 2 young children. Despite the trauma of losing her husband suddenly at an early age and being left to raise her young children, Pagoni continued to work very hard in her field in the fashion and textile industry.
Thanks, Irini. If you could wrap it up. I'm so sorry, we're truly over
Running
time.
out of time, no problem. So basically, in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that Pagoni was a very well-known and respected woman in the Greek community since she migrated to Brunswick in 1961 and contributed enormously to the industry locally, nationally and internationally. And I have extensive information that I could provide to Council at another time.
Great. Thank you for
very
taking
much.
the time to come in. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Next up on this item, I have Marion Atwater with a question.
Hi again, councillors. I'm Marion Atwater from Pascoe Vale. I had written a preamble that included something about item 7.13, which I have emailed to all councillors, and I won't be reading that part out. Regarding report 7.9 on the naming of laneways, I have a question. This report seems to be proposing that councillors give passive endorsement to the continuing use of the 2013 policy on naming places in Merri-bek in dot point 1 of the officer recommendations. I would like to point out that this 2013 policy is so out of date that it refers to a Director of Corporate Services, a position that was abolished in 2018, and to the naming guidelines of 2010. The naming guidelines or rules have changed significantly since 2010, and the current version is the 2022 naming rules for places in Victoria. The naming rules are a mandatory document. So my question for councillors, not the administration, is when a member of the public tries to read the 2013 naming places in Merri-bek policy, do you think it is likely that they will end up informed on the 2010 naming rules and terminology rather than the 2022 naming rules for places in Victoria?
Thanks, Marion. I might ask our Director, Joseph DePaco, to address what you've raised.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Marion, thanks for the question. Each naming project undertaken is carried out in accordance with the 2022 naming rules for places in Victoria. So this information is clearly stipulated and links are provided in each element of our community engagement materials and consultation processes, so things like letters, public notice, our website, Conversations Merri-bek, etc. Council continues to adhere to the current policy as explained and continues to make it evident that we are operating in accordance with the 2022 naming rules for places in Victoria, which is Victorian government policy. I can also confirm that Council's existing policy is scheduled to be updated in early 2024, and the officer report, in fact, on page 167 of the agenda, foreshadows what some of the likely recommended changes to that policy will be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A lot
Great,
of councils have already done that.
Thanks, Marion. Next up, we've got a question on item 8.3, and that's the notice of motion regarding community support during extreme heat waves, and that's John Englert, who we've got here in person.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. John Englert from Fawkner, and I'm also convener of Climate Action Merri-bek. So I think I support this motion and what it's asking for, but I've just got questions to clarify some information. I'd like to know if any of Council's facilities used for cooling respite are power resilient and can continue to provide an air-conditioned cooling at the small possibility of power blackouts. Do any of them have solar and battery power to maintain function during severe or extreme heat events during their hours of opening? And have Council considered ensuring power resilience as part of the Municipal Emergency Management Plan, operation of emergency relief centres, and what result? And I know we haven't opened any emergency relief centres, but I consider it may be a possible thing and we have to be prepared for the possibility. I'm asking this because we have been following what needs to be done in terms of heat waves and the safety of residents with extreme heat waves since Sue Bolton's original motion back in February 2014. On a number of occasions, we've actually had to follow up with Council actions which hadn't been done. So I'm continuing that.
practice in regards to this and understanding, watching what's been happening in the Northern Hemisphere this last summer with many temperature records broken. So I think Council needs to take this extremely seriously.
Agreed. Thanks, John. I might go to Eamon for the specifics of what you've raised, because it is a bit different to the notice of motion itself. Eamon?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the question, John. It is frightening seeing what's happening around the world. To the best of my knowledge, Council doesn't have any backup generators at its facilities. If in an emergency and if we had an emergency relief centre set up and we had power out, we would look to bring in emergency generator backup, and they'd have to be hardwired in, or we'd actually move that relief centre to an area that wasn't affected in the city. But it is an issue. We are looking very, very closely at the forthcoming summer and emergency management planning around that. But we are also exploring our needs for alternative power sources and also non-fossil fuelled power sources, if that's possible as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Next, we've got item 8.5, notice of motion on to reinstate the postal services to Glenroy. And I believe we've got Beres Hammond here in person with a statement. No worries. All good. Thanks, Beres.
Good evening, and thank you for all the support that you've given Glenroy with our little issue. Well, it's not little, it's actually quite big for us. And as a resident of Glenroy, I was very disappointed with the closure of the Glenroy Post Office. The impact of the decision has disadvantaged our aged and disabled communities, particularly those of us who do not drive. Access by train to Oak Park LPO, there's a steep incline up Snell Grove, a step to enter the premises of the LPO, and I can't even talk about the nightmare of the underpass at the Oak Park station for wheelchairs and walkers. The access by train to Broadmeadows LPO, after speaking with aged gentlemen in wheelchairs up in Glenroy, they've told me they won't use the Broadmeadows Shopping Centre because they feel very vulnerable in wheelchairs up there. Access by bus to West Street LPO. Once again, it's step up to their LPO, the premises there. The potential hazard for those in wheelchairs, on walkers, and those unstable on their feet to these LPOs is so extremely high that it really is just a potential for a dreadful accident to happen to one of our residents. And secondly, our aged community are not at all, or not all computer literate, so they pay their rates, their utility bills, and take money from the post office banking. Now they don't have that chance, they don't have that choice anymore to do that, other than to go down the avenues that I've spoken of previously. And I've been stopped in the supermarket and in a coffee shop by people I don't even know, but they had seen me at the protests and they wanted to tell me about how severely this would impact on them as aged people with paying their bills. They're speaking of, yes, we've got a bank there at Glenroy, but some of our people, our aged people, won't use the ATMs. They're scared that they make them very nervous. So it leaves them very vulnerable also to unscrupulous people taking advantage of them if they're taking over their bill paying or going to the bank to get money for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Next up on the same topic, we've got Wendy Rushby, who is here in person with a statement.
Hi, my name's Wendy Rushby. I'm from Hatfield, and it's regarding the post office closure. I'll put my glasses on. A lot of the elderly community are computer illiterate and a lot do not drive a car. How can they manage everything that is usually done at the post office by the staff for them? Apart from the fact they do not own a computer, most of the community enjoy the social aspect of going to the local post office for who they know and love and to have a chat with. And for some, this is the only interaction they have with people outside of their home. For the residents to now have to travel by public transport is so unreasonable for not only the costs, but the time it will take them just to do a simple chore is totally unrealistic. And I'm speaking from example too with my husband who's needs a walker and everything. The post office being recommended we use a fair distance away and very unacceptable. We definitely need a post office in Glenroy, and thank you, Council, for your ongoing support.
Thank you, Wendy. And finally on this topic, we've got Sonia Rutherford here with a statement.
Thank you. My name's Sonia Rutherford and I'm a member of the Save Glenroy Post Office Campaign Committee. I think I'd be correct in saying that as Merri-bek councillors, you are well aware of the problems associated with Australia Post's decision to close Glenroy Post Office. You have in the past few weeks voiced your opposition to the closure and have written letters to the government authorities seeking a review of Australia Post's decision. We thank you, and now we're seeking your ongoing support for residents in their ongoing campaign for the return of a postal service to the Glenroy Shopping Centre. Just a quick summary of the campaign so far. We've had 2 well-attended rallies, one at Post Office Place, the other in at Burke Street at the Australian Post Office headquarters. We've collected 3,000 petitions, 101,400 of which were paper, the others were online. We collected 153 signed letters to the Prime Minister Albanese. And we've collected 230 signed letters to the Australian Post. And these were collected in a space of 2.5 hours one Saturday morning. We delivered these 230 letters to Australia Post at their office in Burke Street. We've received replies to these 2 sets of letters. The first from Australia Post stating they understood it was not what residents wanted, but that they had made the right decision, and that was that. At least they have agreed to meet residents at the Glenroy hub at a date soon to be decided. The reply from Prime Minister Albanese was totally unacceptable. The letters that were sent to him were requesting him to intervene on the community's behalf. But instead, he simply sent the letters to the Australian Post for them to reply on his behalf. And the letter they sent was almost identical to the one that we received from Australia Post previously. We also consider that Australian Post refusal to grant a licence for the Glenroy News Agency to operate a postal service is also unacceptable, and its reversal of this decision that will be part of our ongoing campaign.
Thanks, Sonia. If you could wrap it up.
I
Last
am.
sentence.
The campaign for the return of our postal service continues, and we take heart from Sebastopol, who after 2 years of campaigning regained the return of this service last month. And we urge you to support the motion on this matter later in the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. So I've been informed that we've got a couple more people with questions relating to the Coburg Bluestone Cottage complex. And so because we've only had one question on that so far, we will hear from those other people. So I'll just see if we've got Julie Hogan here in person from the Coburg Historical Society. And she's got a statement.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks.
Again.
Yeah. And of course, sorry, I did forget to mention it, but of course you're a former City of Coburg councillor as well.
Yes, a long, long time ago. And I did ask the other day whether you had breastfeeding and nursery facilities here, because when I had my baby on council, not on council, but...
Wow, a dramatic entrance.
Oh, right. Well,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Oscar. Anyways.
But no, it was a bit more difficult
Yes,
back
I'm
in
sure.
those days, so hopefully it's improved. Thanks very much. I'm Julie Hogan from Coburg North, and this is regarding report agenda item 7.2. And I sort of get a sense of deja vu here again. And as previously stated, CHS, Coburg Historical Society, welcomes the possibility of a new facility. Sorry, I had to change some things. Just want to mention that full transparency seemed to be lacking in the costing of options in the public report to council, which only showed a breakdown of costs for concept 1, not for concept 2, and obviously not for the recently costed additional option. A new report with full costings made public would be more transparent to all. Yesterday we saw the costings and the new concept plan. Councillors might be used to seeing figures in the millions, but we are struggling to understand how the costs for a relatively simple project can be so high. The option presented to councillors recently with 2 separate buildings is impractical and does not show an understanding of the management of visitors, volunteers and the collection. It could have benefited with direct discussions between our members and the architect. We also understand concerns that councillors might have around the current limited public open hours. Volunteers do work many additional hours at the cottage, but many more hours of admin tasks such as digitising, cataloguing and research are often taken at home as the cottage environment is unsuitable. Larger facilities would allow this to be done on site, and with volunteers working on site more often, this would potentially flow on to additional opening hours. The concepts show a lot of money to spend, and it would be disappointing at the very least to spend the amounts shown in concept 1 or 2 and not have a facility that would provide minimal options for anything other than storage.
Thanks. Julie, if you could last couple of sentences, please.
Yep. The phrase build and they will come, I think is particularly relevant. A good, useful, attractive facility will attract more visitors and volunteers and be of long-lasting benefit to the promotion and understanding of history, especially our local stories. Thanks
Thank you,
very much.
Julie. Thank you. And I believe we've also got Annalie Hammond here with us in person with a statement or a question.
Good evening, I'm Annalie Hawkins from Coburg North, and I've been associated with the Historical Society for about the last 3 years. So I have a very specific question to put to you, and that is, I understand councillors are looking at options 1 and 2 at the moment. Now, does council realise that option 2 does not propose a suitable storage facility for the society, as it is not air-conditioned? It does not have temperature control, as I understand it. So there's an understanding that this was a like for like, but indeed the annex at the moment has been used for storage and displays for many, many years. So I just wish to home in on this fact that option 2 we don't regard as fit for purpose regardless of the square meterage. And I think that's a real concern due to the value of the objects and the material that is presently contained in the annex, which will be demolished. So my question is, do the councillors realise this? Because it's not that apparent from the discussion, and that's apart from the square meterage. Now, my statement is quite simple. Not only as a member of the Historical Society, but as a historian and a resident of almost a quarter of a century, I'm really concerned that the history of the area is looked after appropriately, and that goes beyond printed records in libraries. It really is about preserving the voice of the community, and so I just ask you to regard that beyond the dollar cost, which we all have to take into account, but I think needs to be set aside, that this is an area that, in my opinion, has been relatively neglected by the council. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I think we've got time for one last question. So that's it in terms of what I initially had for questions that are on the agenda. We did have a few extra people, though, that wanted to ask questions on Kent Road. So for the last one, I will go to Jane Holroyd, who is here in person with a statement. And then, I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of people that have submitted statements and questions, but we will have to wrap it up there, given question time is coming to an end.
Thank you. Just before I start, is it okay if I just hand councillors just a map showing the context of why I'm here on behalf of the
If you want me
high
to pass
school?
it to Adam, and then we can...
All right, thank you.
Oh, thanks. Take one and pass it down. Yeah. All right.
Thanks, everyone. My name is Jane Holroyd. I'm from Coburg North, and my statement is about Report 7.1. I'm a parent at Coburg High School's Walking and Riding Committee, which is also the principal, Brent Horton, school captain Josh, and former school council president Kate Hall. Each day, 250 teenagers, or 1/5 of our students, ride to Coburg High. Just 23% of our students are driven, in contrast to the average Melbourne secondary school, where 64% of students arrive by car. A large factor in our students' travel choice is Coburg High's location on Merri-bek's safest bike route. The Upfield Path, O'Hay Street and Pentridge Boulevard all offer bike journeys largely separated from vehicles. Not all of our students enjoy this sanctuary. Our committee recently spoke at Victoria's Parliamentary Inquiry into Road Safety. Merri-bek's record on vulnerable road users is poor. We told the hearing more separated bike infrastructure is urgently needed on state and council roads. Principal Brent had surveyed our students, and Year 12 student Josh relayed a snippet of their experiences. Many told of aggressive and distracted drivers who pass too close to them on Merri-bek's roads and at roundabouts. This is a story from Sage, relayed by Josh. She's in Year 11. She was hit by a car that wrecked the bike and spilled them onto the road. Nobody got out of their car to check on them, and drivers even beeped while they were crying and trying to get back on their bike. People aged between 5 and 18 are nearly 17% of the Australian population, but I understand their voices are fairly absent in this evaluation of the Kent Road trial. Out of 1,083 survey responses, only 5 people aged 15 years or under participated. That's less than half of 1% of the survey respondents. We know many young people walk and ride or want to. It's the way that they can get around Merri-bek independently. But young people are highly vulnerable on our roads and they need your protection. A student who rides to school in Merri-bek is 6 times more likely to be seriously injured than a kid who lives close enough to school to walk. Half of people seriously injured riding in Merri-bek are hit on council-controlled streets. These statistics come from Merri-bek's submission to the parliamentary inquiry. The submission shows car dooring, drivers illegally turning across cyclists or veering into them are common crash scenarios. So our committee is bewildered Council would redirect the Glenroy to Coburg cycle route via backstreet shimmies. Shimmies don't address the biggest risks to the people riding on your roads. The Kent Road bike lanes need to be improved, not removed. Stop compromising on safety. Stop asking people who aren't engineers how to design infrastructure for our most vulnerable road users. This isn't what consultation is for.
Thanks, Jane.
To finish positively, your Open Streets program is helping many people reimagine streets so that they can serve more types of people, especially our young people, and we urge you to persist in this vein. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Jane. And with that, we will conclude our question time at 8:17. And so with that, we'll just quickly, I'll see if I have consensus from councillors just to reorder the agenda. So we'll still do 7.1 Kent Road, 7.2 Bluestone Cottage, and then just bring up Councillor Hart's notice of motion on the post office to the third item, if that's fine, given the people we have. Yep, all good. Jeez, all right, yeah, if I can remember that, yes, we can all do that. That's fine. So first up, we'll go to this item 7.1. I see Councillor Pulford with his hand up. That's the conclusion of Kent Road separated bike lane trial and the next steps for Coburg to Glenroy bike route. I'll just see if there are any councillors with conflicts of interest. Councillor Yildiz?
Yeah, just want to make it known that I thought there was a conflict, and I've had a discussion with the CEO at the time. She doesn't believe there is a conflict because my wife's business, she moved in there in April this year. The bike lanes went in June 2021, and it doesn't affect her. She's actually on the other side, and they've got car parking behind her business. So I personally don't think there's a conflict. I've confirmed that with the CEO. I've had discussions with governance, and there is no perceived conflict on my part.
Okay.
And I was voting for and against this way before April of 2023, and I've made my comments and my feelings about the dedicated bike lanes through social media and through other avenues, including the media.
All right.
So just to clarify, there was a conflict of interest 2 months ago, but there isn't one now. Is that?
Well, I'm happy to answer that.
All right,
2
we'll
months
have that
ago-
and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
No. All right. Okay, that's true. Sorry. So Councillor Yildiz does not believe that he has a conflict of interest. So that's it. Any other conflicts of interest from councillors? No. In that case, Councillor Pulford, you wanted to move?
Yes, I'm moving an alternate resolution.
Yep. You need to unmute yourself, please. Yep. And we'll bring that alternate resolution up onto the screen and make sure everyone can see it, and that you've got a seconder, and we'll go into debate from there. Great. Do you have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Conlon to second. Councillor Pulford.
Thank you. I'm moving an alternate resolution that would see us save the protected bike lanes along Kent Road in Pascoe Vale. My alternative also keeps council officers' plans to install a pedestrian crossing on Kent Road outside the medical centre to help improve safety for people accessing the centre. That will see 5 car parks removed to make space for the pedestrian crossing, but it wouldn't impact overall the number of car parks available in the area, as it doesn't require the removal of 10 additional spaces west of Valerie Street, as the council officer recommendation does. the council also added 16 car parks along Cumberland Road at the beginning of the trial, adding to the number of car parks around Coal Reserve. Importantly, my alternative will also keep the protected bike lanes to help keep people getting around on bike safe in our community. I'm disappointed by the officer recommendation that calls for the bike lanes to be ripped out. I believe the survey that council's used to justify this recommendation is flawed. Council's own report notes that people were asked to compare the current infrastructure to the infrastructure that was previously there, not no protected bike lanes, which is what they have now put on the table. It feels as if council has caved to the consistent opposition of a handful of residents instead of listening to the vast majority of our community who want safer, cleaner, greener, healthier and more connected neighbourhoods. For this year's budget, 80 out of 120 submissions from community members were calling for council to invest in more active transport infrastructure. Since the council agenda came out last week, we've heard from many community groups and members who are horrified at the prospect of us ripping up protected bike lanes in 2023. We've heard support for saving the lanes from our Sustainable Transport Advisory Committee, the Bicycle Users Group, Climate Action Merri-bek, Walk on Merri-bek, Neighbours United for Climate Action, and members of Coburg High's Walking and Riding Committee. Community members have told us how important protected bike lanes are for them and their families to be and feel safe getting around our city. We've heard from members of our community with disabilities who find getting around on bike the easiest and best option for them. Bike lanes and infrastructure help make our neighbourhoods more accessible. Protected bike lanes help make more people, especially women, feel safer cycling. They're key to more people making more trips on bikes, which helps cut emissions and pollution, making our community cleaner, healthier and more connected. Kent Road forms part of a planned cycling route from Coburg to Glenroy. Council and the Victorian Government still have much work to do to complete this route and make it safe for people to cycle. But ripping out the Kent Road protected bike lanes would take us further away from linking up the route. It would take us further away from our goal. It would also make it harder for council to meet our goals for climate action. The climate crisis demands that we reshape our city to cut emissions and build resilience to the impacts of rising temperatures. This gives us also the opportunity to meet our community's demands for more livable, connected and sustainable neighbourhoods. We should be building more active transport infrastructure, not ripping out some of the few specific protected bike lanes that we have in our community. I hope that other councillors vote to save the Kent Road protected bike lanes tonight. I hope they listen to members of our community who've expressed how much they appreciate the bike lanes, how much they want to see council acting on the climate crisis, and how they make our neighbourhoods better off overall. So please do vote for this alternative resolution.
Thanks, Councillor Pulford. As the seconder, Councillor Conlon.
Yes. So first of all, I want to thank the Sustainable Transport Advisory Committee reps coming along tonight and speaking up and telling us about how you're very disappointed about the consultation process. It's very disappointing, I think, that council's in this position yet again this month, when last month we had the same issue where the First Nations Advisory Committee reps came to us with a statement expressing significant disappointment that council adopted a resolution on the voice without consulting that committee. And yet again, we're here tonight where we've got another recommendation by officers which has been formulated before advising the advisory committee. So that's very disappointing, and I hope it's a pattern of behaviour that we can change. Been trying to come up with all the arguments that I know are going to come up tonight about why these protected bike lanes are supposedly dangerous, and I am struggling to come up with it because ultimately this issue is quite simple to me. It's turned into this unnecessarily convoluted debate. It really is quite simple. The whole purpose of protected bike lanes is to protect people from cars by creating a physical separation between the two. Us humans are made of soft flesh, skin and bones. We're no match for fast-moving, one-ton objects of steel. That's why every road safety expert consistently argues that the best way to protect vulnerable road users is by separating them from cars, not mixing them in with cars. That doesn't make sense. If a footpath has an imperfect design, the answer is not to rip up the footpath and turn it into a traffic lane. And I think this issue for me is best illustrated by an image which I saw recently, which showed a mum on a bike with a small child behind her riding on a small bike, and they were riding on a green painted bike lane, not a physically separated one, and they were surrounded by a sea of traffic. and there was a caption that read, "Would you let your kid ride on this road?" And I think that image really said it all for me. Anyone who looks at that image intuitively knows that the answer to the question is a resounding no. Like, people need to be separated from big vehicles like cars. So that's why I think the arguments that tonight that are going to suggest that the bike lanes make people unsafe are really disingenuous. Some people have made the argument that bike lanes make the road unsafe because it's harder to drive through the road. Well, it is true that the Kent Road bike lanes have resulted in narrowing the road from 2 lanes to 1, and that it is a bit more tricky for motorists to get through there. They do have to navigate and negotiate with each other. But the outcome is that the cars move more slowly. And if you listen to every traffic expert who talks about making our roads safer, they always talk about slowing traffic down in order to make it safer. Slowing cars down is precisely the best way to make the road safer. People are less likely to be seriously injured if they're hit by a slow-moving car than a fast-moving car. The reality is, if we're going to transform our city to help people get around by public transport, walking and cycling, we need to change something. You can't say you're in favour of protected bike lanes and then vote to rip them out.
Thank you, Councillor Conlon. Do we have a speaker against this motion? Councillor Yildiz?
Yep, I know I've only got 3 minutes. I want to begin by thanking Greg Rodwell, and I also want to thank his team, and just to highlight the fact that Greg and his team are qualified engineers. These guys know their stuff. But I also want to thank all those people that have emailed us, whether you're for or against the removal of the bike lanes. Just a couple of key things. We are not voting, we weren't voting on the original motion to rip bike lanes out. We were voting to remove them. It just makes it very convenient that we use terminology and vocabulary that's so abhorrent, ripping them out. We installed these bike lanes, or pop-up bike lanes, in June 2021. The distance from Cornwall Road to Cumberland Road is 320 metres. They were always a trial. We spent $308,285 on the bike lanes. Our consultation process wasn't the best, and we acknowledge that. We have had countless petitions signed by the hundreds, and some of those people are here tonight. Emails, texts, social media posts, and many residents have come along to council meetings time and time again and stood up here and spoken about their opposition to the bike lanes. Vic Roads have removed 40 kilometres of lanes installed in the city of Port Phillip this year. City of Melbourne finally paused its CBD bike lanes rollout in 2022. They listened to the ratepayers, they listened to the many businesses that wanted them removed. The Age journalist yesterday, Pat Hatch, not from the Herald Sun, mind you, from The Age, saw one bike yesterday from 2:30 p.m. till 3:30 p.m. He then went and asked the guy who was collecting his son from school, Will DeMiliano, and he asked him, "Are you happy with the bike lanes?" Will said, "To be honest, no, they're dangerous. This is fact. This is not made up. I haven't just made this up." There are a number of other bike riders who I have spoken to who have said to me, it's not the golden standard of bike lanes. They say it floods and it is causing major issues for bike riders, for children and parents as well. It merging into the large roundabout for bike riders is also very unsafe. On that corner of Kent and Cumberland Road. I too ride a bike, so we're not anti-bike haters and we don't hate bike lanes. I've got no issue with painted lines. It's not working and it's poorly designed, and officers have acknowledged that. This is a case of infrastructure creating safety issues that were not there before. The ideology that every road and street operates in exactly the same way is wishful thinking. Parking is an issue. Cars are parked on the bollards. The road has gone from 2 vehicle lanes to 1. There are traffic jams, gridlocks, access issues, near misses, road rage, accidents. There is only 1 lane. We've had complaints from drivers, patients, pedestrians, families, residents who visit the church, kindergarten, Pascoe Secondary College. The Kent Road Medical Centre sees 8,000 patients a month. They've got 50,000 patients on their books. Families and sons and daughters are dropping off their mums and dads and trying to look for parking 500 metres from the medical centre. Almost finished, Mayor. The Coburg District Footy Club at Coal Reserve has made complaints. There are less spaces for cars. We've removed parking from... Sorry, excuse me. We've identified risks and hazards. Yep. Almost done. The street sweeper can't get in there. Our waste truck can't pick up the bins. There's regular...
Thanks, Councillor Yildiz. I'm sorry, I've let each of you go over by the same amount of time there. Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Next up, I'll see if there is any other speaker in favour of this motion. No. Okay. All right, I was going to speak in favour, but was waiting. So I'll speak in favour of this briefly, and we'll just get the timer going. Thanks. So for me, I think that this is also quite simple, as was said earlier. When it comes to the Kent Road protected bike lanes and protected bike lanes just generally across the municipality and our rollout of active transport infrastructure, I think about what is the purpose of being elected as a councillor. And for me, there's obviously two key parts. It's both representing the community, but also planning adequately for the future, for future need and for future, I guess, changes in circumstances that we know are coming. And one of the most incredibly important things for me is the need for us to be properly encouraging through safe infrastructure, mode shift, and getting people to feel more comfortable, more safe to ride their bikes around, to use public transport, to be walking through our municipality instead of driving everywhere. Now, as somebody who lives in one of the northernmost areas of the municipality, I know quite well what it means to have pretty much no protected bike infrastructure. I know quite well what it means to have to walk a big distance to get to the train station or to get to the bus stop, and to have that lack of accessibility and connectivity. And so what council has attempted to do through creating this separated bike lane right here on Kent Road is to connect up Glenroe to Coburg, two of our core activity centres in the municipality. And so for us, this isn't just about a 300-metre strip of separated bike lane. This is about adequately planning for the future to give people the infrastructure that will separate them away from people driving cars, who we know may sometimes be distracted. People driving cars may have other things going on where they just miss something, or they may be driving in a way that they shouldn't be driving. And so, as has been said, when you've got somebody encased in this metal enclosure versus somebody that's just on a bike, or even a pedestrian, somebody who's just trying to take a walk, you need to keep these different people, these different forms of transport separate from each other. All of the experts say that. Everybody who walks and who rides around our municipality knows that when you are physically separated from people driving cars, it makes it a lot easier and a lot safer to get around. So I just want to wrap up by saying that for me, I hear that there has been some opposition, obviously, to these bike lanes. We have also had so many emails and phone calls and people reaching out saying, please keep these, please don't wind them back, please roll out more. So for me, this is about weighing up all of the things that people have gotten in touch with me and are telling me, and also thinking what's best for the future. And for me, what's best for the future is rolling out more protected bike infrastructure and encouraging a shift towards more climate-friendly modes of getting around and more accessible and affordable modes of getting around. And so that is what keeping these separated bike lanes does in my mind. Thanks, councillors. And now we'll move on to a speaker against the motion, and we've got Councillor Lambros-Tapnos.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. Can I start by just saying that hearing the debate tonight, I agree entirely with everything that's been said by the mover, the seconder, and the mayor, particularly around the vision and the ideology and about we need to build cycling infrastructure. And I do believe it is a case of build it and people will use it, and we need to push those boundaries. I also believe that as a council we have been doing that. And since 2022, when we came up with this program and funded it, and 2021 when we implemented it, we've implemented a few kilometres across the city of cycling infrastructure. And they've worked. They've been great. And we've kept them. And I supported that decision, as I supported the decision around Kent Road in 21 and last year with some modifications. But today, there is a but. You could look at the ideological view at a very high level and say we need to build more, and I agree entirely. But we also need to look at the practical, on the ground, how does it impact Kent Road? And after 2 years of a trial, after modifying it multiple times to try to make it work, the result is that it hasn't worked. So whilst we've installed kilometres of cycling infrastructure, and we will continue to build kilometres more, 300 metres of cycling infrastructure on Kent Road has not worked for a number of reasons that are specific to that road, including but not limited to the fact that there is one of the most busiest health clinics in Pascoe Vale on that road, and it's visited by a lot of people with mobility issues, and they have found it challenging to visit the clinic. Last time, a year ago, I was very supportive of, we can make it work. I wanted to believe that it could work. We made some changes and I supported those. Now, having a report that says they're not safe, physically in Kent Road, I'm not talking about the broader issue of cycling is safer than road users, of course, we all support that. But physically, for those people coming and going to Kent Road, they're unsafe. Once we have a report, I can't in good conscience vote against that, because I know that in the future, if something were to happen on that road, we as a councillors made a decision knowing that we had a report that said it was unsafe, and we ignored that for ideological views. And that is a risk I'm not willing to take with the community. If the professional engineers say that it's unsafe, then they must be removed, even though that goes against my wishes, who want to see more.
Yeah.
My wishes who want to see more cycling infrastructure in the city. So thank you.
I don't believe the report says they're unsafe. I just wanted to check that.
It says they're unpopular.
All right, let's get some clarification on that point of order. Greg or Anita? Just a clarification on the actual unsafe part.
Yeah. So the survey with the community found that people said that they didn't feel safe in the lane compared to the earlier version of the lane. So when it comes to the matter of safety, it was people's perception of safety, and it was to do with the updated trial compared to the original trial.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Anita. And thank you, Councillor Tapp. Do you want your last sentence?
I was going to say,
Last
people's
sentence.
perception of safety, which is still a very valid point for me, because I still think that goes to the heart of the issue.
Thanks, Councillor Tapanos. I'll see if there are any other speakers in favour of this motion. Okay, there we go. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, yes, this is quite concerning, this report, and some of the perceptions that have been conveyed here. There's been clearly a very strong campaign against these lanes from day one, and that was somewhat related to the very quick rollout that we did on this. And then we tried to correct it a year ago, and apparently, you know, people are still tripping up and having trouble crossing a road when we removed a lot of the infrastructure. I sort of question about people's ability to get in a car and attend a medical centre. If you can do that, I would think you should be able to cross a road where you have a bit of bike infrastructure. It's not that difficult, I would have thought, but maybe that's something the medicos should be investigating, and the occupational health or occupational therapists at the medical centre should be advising us a bit on that. But it seems a bit odd. The thing that I'm concerned about here is this very small section of road becoming such a focus for the rest of you know, so many people who need to be able to get from one part of the city to another. I think the argument about the unsafeness of protected bike lanes is distraction from the reality where the evidence clearly shows that oversized vehicles, subs and other growing larger vehicles on our road are actually the cause of many injuries and deaths in Australia for walkers and bike riders. These vehicles are recognised as being a growing problem, not just for that, but also to the CO2 emissions. They're not going down because of these larger vehicles on our roads. That is uncontested in my view, that's evidence-based. Unlike Europe, we're following the United States in these trends, and advertising at the footy and the rugby and all that, well, you can see they're advertising them, and then lots of Australian blokes go out and buy them, and then we have to contend with them. And then we have to have park them on Kent Road, and you can't get through because they're so big. The removal of the lanes in Port Phillip and Melbourne are not because of the danger that protected bike lanes provide, or as alleged that they provide. It's actually due to the car lobby and the return of cars and driving after COVID. So having protected bike lanes enables young kids, whom I teach most weeks, gives them the experience to get off the footpath and to actually be on a roadway and to experience this. And to remove these in a small 300 section part of the city, to me, is counter to safety and experiences for younger people and riders and women and many people who want to get out and try riding bikes. So I'm very supportive of Councillor Pulford's motion, and I'm very concerned about officers putting up a motion like this, which is inverting our paradigm of prioritising walkers, then active transport users like bike riders.
Thanks, Councillor Riley. Now I know we've got Councillor Davidson who wishes to speak against. I'll just mention as well that because this is the only motion we've currently got on the table, that if a councillor wishes to move a different motion to foreshadow. Did you foreshadow?
Oh, no, I'm happy to.
Okay, just to clarify, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Davidson.
Okay, thank you. The officer report agrees that the best option for the road bike lanes is that it partially be removed and a new shimmy route be put out for consultation. The Glenroy link is still a priority and always has been something that I support. Now, the overwhelming evidence indicates the current bike route is not only unsafe, and I do say unsafe, but is also overwhelmingly not supported. What I am supportive of is a safer alternative for bike users and bike lanes. I'm voting for safety and for bike routes in Merri-bek. The current bike route is not supportive of less confident bike riders. The report also notes that even those who said they felt safe riding on Kent Road left negative feedback. The trial has had overwhelming negative feedback overall, and it's not supported by bike riders, residents, the neighbouring sporting club, the neighbouring medical centre, and also the local MP, Anthony Cianfloni. The current design itself is highly problematic. It ends at a roundabout on Kent Road, which is highly difficult to navigate and feeds into a much busier section of Kent Road and isn't protected. The current bike route requires riders to negotiate shared traffic lanes on busy roads at 4 roundabouts. 4 roundabouts. 3 on Derby Street alone and 1 on Kent Road. And we know the risk of roundabouts for bike riders. That's well documented. That's fact. That's evidence. Now, there are over 1,500 vehicles per day, and there's a complete lack of examples of separated bike lanes with two-way traffic flow when there are over 1,500 vehicles. Kent Road and Derby Street have higher traffic volumes, which makes the current bike route inherently unsafe. By comparison, the alternate shimmy route, the Pascoval shimmy, as it's now going to be called, follows back streets, which have lower speed and volume for cars. It utilises pedestrian-operated signals to cross at Cumberland Road and Gaffney Street. And this route avoids all roundabouts except one, which has planned improvements. Normally, when a project like this takes place, it interrupts the usual traffic patterns. It's common for travel behaviours to adjust over time and suit new network arrangements. However, in this case, ongoing traffic volume behaviours continued and didn't lessen over the 2-year trial period, and they've just continued. This was unexpected and indicates that an alternative option to the trial infrastructure should be pursued. Now, there was an option for councillors to take up cycling on the alternate route, the Pascoval shimmy. I was the only councillor that did that, and I'm not a confident bike road user. I've got a mountain bike because I like to ride on the creek trail. I rode the alternate shimmy route, and I felt much safer navigating the back streets rather than the roads and 4 roundabouts. I can't imagine what it is like to go through 4 roundabouts. I didn't even have the confidence to do the proposed route. And this was a trial, and it has been tried. It has been tried for 2 years, and it's unsafe. The feedback and the empirical evidence says that without a doubt or uncertainty, the importance of the connection between Coburg and Glenroy remains, and the forthcoming work to consult with the community regarding the Pascoval shimmy will begin. and I cannot ignore a report that says this route is unsafe. It's not right.
Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Okay, so do we have any other speakers in favour of this motion? Any other speakers against this motion? Councillor Hart?
Thank you. And thank you very much to the many emails that we've received.
Monica, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, thanks very much. Thanks very much to the multitude of emails that we've received in recent days. I guess having read through those emails, I have a concern to some degree that I think the issue of Kent Road is very much being portrayed as, I think, as a testing ground of council's wider policies on commitment to cycling infrastructure and commitment to protective bike lanes per se. And my concern about that is I think it's an erroneous way to portray this debate, because I think what a lot of the feedback that I've been seeing recently urging councillors to vote in favour of the motion that's before us at the moment largely ignores and doesn't drill down into some of the specifics in relation to Kent Road. And what concerns me is the decision-making framework. And that decision-making should really be governed in relation to the specifics of the trial. And let's remember, it's a trial, the trial in relation to Kent Road. So that we're getting the terms, the emotive terms of ripping up bike lanes. This is an evaluation of a trial. And that evaluation's been going on now for a period of roughly 2 years. So in those 2 years, we saw a period where there was going to be a decision just to make it that permanent. I think that was in March, and that was with structures that were incredibly unsafe up in Kent Road at that period of time. There was a further attempt to then discontinue the trial about 12 months ago. So this is the third time that we've been debating this at council. So that shows you some of the issues and some of the necessity to really look closely at what's happening at Kent Road. Councillor Yildiz raised a lot of the issues, but one of the things that concerns me most is that what we've got is 300 metres. But what happens after that? And I think that's what Councillor Davidson was just referring to. After that, the only other option is really to go down Kent Road and then Derby Street, ones that absolutely terrify me to some extent. And I used to be a bike rider, but I'm no longer. But I would not go down those routes. And what we've got to remember is where this started out was that when we had the Glenroy to Coburg link, this was when the link was going to be proposed down Cumberland Road. So we've actually had a change in that whole structure since then. So that has, no one has mentioned that tonight. And that's
Councillor Hart, if you could wrap it up. Last sentence, please.
I will, okay. So this is not a debate about the need for more infrastructure, but I think we do need to have a better framework and a better planning decision on how we look at where we have protective lanes. And I don't know where was, is the jury still out on
Councillor Hart.
paths? I don't like them, but I think we need to have that wider decision making, and this has to be tonight.
Okay.
A decision
Thank you.
about
You're
Kent Road.
43 seconds over. Okay,
Thank
thanks. So, any other speakers on this one, or shall we go back for... Okay, Councillor Bolton, and then I reckon after this I will start sticking people strictly to time because we're going to carry on for a while.
I should speak on this. I've found the issue of the separated bike lanes on Kent Road to be extraordinarily difficult because I actually think they're valid arguments on both sides. And I also, similar to Councillor Hart, I think the specifics of Kent Road do need to be looked at and not just seeing Kent Road as purely a testing ground. I also agree that the council hasn't built enough separated bike lanes, and I also recognise that because of how cities have been designed ever since governments destroyed public transport systems in the late 60s and early 70s, it is very tricky retrofitting streets with separated bike lanes. So all of those factors exist, and I certainly wouldn't celebrate the removal of the lanes in Port Phillip and the pause of the lanes in the City of Melbourne. And I also think with, certainly the City of Melbourne, with effective actual consultation with delivery drivers, you can overcome a lot of those sort of issues and keep separated bike lanes. But coming to Kent Road, I do feel very torn because I'm particularly concerned about the need for a link between Glenroy and Coburg. But I also do feel that there needs to be a clear plan about where the bike lanes go after Cumberland Road. And because I think Derby Street is extremely unsafe, with the painted bike lane being sandwiched in between parked cars and not just other cars that are driving, but actually trucks and buses and so forth. And then the alternative is Cumberland Road. And I think those two options are not sufficient. There needs to be a clear plan as to where the bike lanes go after Cumberland Road. And so, and I was initially sort of felt that the shimmy was a safer option. And generally, when I went down the shimmy yesterday, I think I felt safer in all except for Alpine Grove, where I certainly wouldn't like a child riding down in between those two lanes of very large parked vehicles. But I also wouldn't like a child riding down Cumberland Road or down Derby Street.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton.
So
if you could do your last sentence.
I'm struggling with this decision, and I'm possibly going to actually abstain or vote against this motion for those reasons. But I also recognise
Thanks, Councillor Bolton.
Facilities for parents on bikes with children as well.
Thank you. It's well and truly over time. So we'll now go to Councillor Pulford for his right of reply. We'll put this to the vote and then we'll hopefully get through things a bit more on time.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Officers were clear tonight. This report does not say that the protected bike lanes are unsafe. But this decision is about safety. How will cyclists be safe on Kent Road without protected bike lanes? When there are over 1,500 car movements on a road a day, doesn't that make the case for protected bike lanes to protect cyclists from all those car movements? These bike lanes are supported by cyclists, as evidenced by some of the statements made here tonight, and many of the emails we received over the past days. In the same Age article referenced tonight by a councillor here, Rory, who was here tonight asking us... Sure. In the same Age article, we had the resident Rory who was asking us a question here tonight, saying he uses those bike lanes daily.
All right.
Didn't I?
Okay,
I said Rory as in the resident. I didn't.
All right, Councillor Yildiz, let's...
I said the councillor.
Okay. Thanks for raising that really important point of order. Councillor Pulford, if you could continue.
Driver aggression is up across the board. There's a whole parliamentary inquiry into the impact of road safety behaviours on vulnerable road users because of this trend. It's not just on Kent Road. There are no longer issues about garbage trucks since the updated design, as claimed by a councillor here tonight. If Kent Road residents want to make sure there are 2 lanes for traffic, we could actually look at taking out one of the lanes of parked cars rather than removing the bike lanes. There are other options. But really, I'm sick of other councillors saying that they agree we must build more bike lanes or that they share the vision of climate resilient, cleaner and greener streets. But when the rubber hits the road or the bike lanes hit the streets, they vote to remove them. You can't say you believe in the climate crisis and then vote against some of the examples of climate action we have in our city, some of the handful we have. We don't move closer to a safe cycling link between Glenroy and Coburg by ripping up part of the only infrastructure we have on that link. I really want to thank community groups and members who've turned out to express their support for a more livable community, a more accessible community connected with safe bike lanes and active transport infrastructure. Please stay engaged and involved, even if we don't get a win tonight in saving these bike lanes. I think there's more gains we can have for active transport in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pulford. So we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour of this motion? All those against? So that is lost with one abstention. So I'll just do a call for a division on that. So all those in favour of this motion, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Conlon, myself and Councillor Riley. All those against are Councillor Tapanos, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Hart, Councillor Yildiz and Councillor Bolton. So that motion has been lost. And so we'll now pick up on the foreshadowed motion, on the motion that was foreshadowed by Councillor Davidson. Can I confirm which motion that is?
I would like to move the officer recommendation
Great.
to remove the bike lanes.
Okay, so Councillor Davidson to move, Councillor Yildiz to second, and I might keep debate tight on this part.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. I think that common sense has prevailed here, and my arguments in support of the officer recommendation have been outlined previously. I look forward to seeing the consultation for the new shimmy route for bike riders to have a safer alternative to ride the connection between Coburg and Glenroy. And I'm pleased that this was supported, and thank you for those who have attended tonight and the debate that we've had.
Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Yildiz as the seconder.
Just very quickly, painted lanes, what's the solution? So if this officer's report is in fact is voted in favour, painted lanes, excuse me, however, we need to consider the speed limit. I mean, I know we've had some councillors, in particular Councillor Bolton, talk about Derby Street. That's fine, we can reduce the speed limit, but what the state government has done with Derby Street is they've allowed the 50 kilometres from Boundary Road up to Kent Road, and then from Kent Road all the way down to O'Hay Street, they've made it a 40-kilometre zone by having those painted bike lanes there, and they've stuck not one, but 2 speed cameras there, and they've done it very, very quickly. So talk about revenue raising, but I just thought I'd mention that because I think it's quite disgusting what they've done. Anyway, to create a safe cycling route from Glenroy to Coburg, no doubt it needs to connect to the upfield bike path, but I argue that we need to also identify low stress routes, as Councillor Davidson mentioned. We may need to consider connecting to the Moonee Ponds Creek Trail. Goes from Gladstone Park through Tullamarine, through Essendon, and goes through Pascoe Vale. I acknowledge a rider I spoke to a cyclist this evening, and he mentioned that there is flooding on that trail. I appreciate that. But whatever design changes we make to the existing infrastructure or design won't work. It's clear it's not going to work. Concrete bollards are not working. We really are, what's really disappointing, and I'm not going to have a go at anyone in particular, but we're in an era where some will push their political agenda onto others, and when others don't agree, it's so abhorrent. The scaremongering and making us as though we're bike haters and we're anti-bike lane people. I've ridden on that track, on Kent Road. I do ride a bike. We are not anti-bike and we're not anti-bike lanes. Can I please make that clear? But what officers have done, not residents, officers, these are our full-time staff that spend their day, and they are qualified engineers. They're not officers that have only been here 3 weeks. I'm not degrading anyone, but these officers have been here for quite some time. We need to acknowledge that the cycling infrastructure has not worked. Let's just bite the bullet and acknowledge that. It hasn't, and we should no longer stress the residents in and around Pascoe Vale. People are keeping away from that area deliberately because of the issues that I've just raised earlier. And I just want to acknowledge, in particular, those councillors that have listened to the residents. We've listened to the cyclists as well. But I think, in particular with Kent Road, the way that we've managed this, even in terms of the way the lack of consultation hasn't been very good either. And I'm about moving forward. I'm about what's next. What can we do, as Councillor Davison said, whether it's a shimmy route, let's do it.
Thanks, Councillor Yildiz. I'll see if there are any speakers against this motion.
I have an amendment.
Okay.
So,
could you please outline what that is?
Given that many councillors tonight have basically said that they support bike lanes or protected bike lanes, but just not on Kent Road, I've got an amendment that council seeks a report before the end of 2023 for options to install on-road protected bike lanes within the vicinity of Kent Road.
All right, I'll see if that is acceptable to the mover or the seconder.
No, we've got consultation going out for the Pascoe Vale shimmy, and I'd like to see the results of the consultation and follow proper process.
All right, that's a no. So I'll see if you've got a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Bolton to second that amendment. Councillor Conlon?
Oh yeah, I mean it's quite obvious. So we've heard from lots of councillors that it's we support protected bike lanes, just not in this location. So I guess the purpose of this report is to see if there's support for on-road protected bike lanes in another location.
Thanks, Councillor Conlon. Councillor Bolton as the seconder. Just your microphone.
I'd like to keep all options open. So my support for the motion that's before us at the moment is not designed to say no more separated bike lanes, but my feeling is my reason for voting against that motion, as I said before, is because of the fact that separated bike lanes end at Cumberland Road. So I'm prepared to look at all options.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. I might move that we put that one to the vote. If
The amendment?
the amendment.
Yes.
Oh, fine, yeah.
I don't have a problem with, sorry, thank you. I don't have a problem with the amendments if it included all options, not just on road, because I think you could also have a look at the shared path option. And you can also, there's a park there on the south end. You can also have a look at maybe a cycling path further south on Kent Road that goes through the park. So the solution doesn't always have to be on road. It can be also on the footpath. It can be in another road. It can be through the park. So I think if it's sort of all-inclusive of having a look at alternatives, I'll be happy to support that.
All right, so just to clarify though, you were speaking against because we can't have an amendment to an amendment, right? Yeah, so that's that is the amendment. That is what will be put to the vote. So I'll see if there are any other speakers on this actual amendment. Yeah.
Quickly speak. So what the original report was going to do was remove the current infrastructure by the 31st of December this year. Then we were going to open up feedback and open up consultation and genuine consultation with the community and say, what do you want? For us to make a decision tonight, I respect Councillor Conlon. I know exactly where he's going with this, which is fine. I appreciate that. But I just think making that decision today, we're contradicting what we're trying to do. We're saying we've made a mistake, we acknowledge it, let's remove the current infrastructure by the 31st of December, which is in the report, and then let's have a clean slate and start this process again. And if the officers identify a route based on the feedback they get from the residents, I'll be supporting it.
Thanks, Councillor Yildiz. I might just put that one to the vote then. That's fine. Yep. All right. All those in favour of this amendment? All those against this amendment? So that amendment has won and becomes part of the substantive. I'll check with the mover and the seconder if you still wish to move and second that motion.
The officer recommendation?
Yeah, with that amendment that's been incorporated.
Yes, I'll still move it.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've had the mover and the seconder speak. Do we have any speakers against this amended officer recommendation?
So we put it to the vote.
Yeah.
Do we have to vote on that?
No, it's procedural. No, it's procedural.
Yeah, I think we've got to vote on that. All right, so we've had a procedural motion to put that one to the vote then. All those in favour of putting that to the vote? 1, 2, 3. All those against putting that to the vote? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that has lost, so we'll continue debating. So I'll see if there is any speaker against this amended officer recommendation. Sorry. Any other speaker in favour of this amended officer recommendation? Okay, Councillor Hart. Sorry.
Yeah, look, I did just want to take the opportunity to thank the officers for this report. I don't think it was an easy task, but I think it's a good report. And reading it, I think the time that was devoted to looking at the various sort of options, the explanation of that, and I really appreciated the difficulty. And I take the point that Councillor Bolton made. It really highlights what happens when you try to retrofit, when you've got limited space that you're operating and all the considerations that have to be part of it. So I really appreciated, I think, a very honest, forthright approach to trying to throw up options and trying to actually resolve some of these dilemmas. I actually agree, and I know the amendment's been included, but I think Councillor Tapanos is right, because while I support the proposal to look at the shimmy, I also would like to see that a little bit more open. I would like to think, because it was something that was discussed previously, I would like to see what's possible with Coles Reserve, and I would also like to sort of revisit, not totally in favour of shared paths, but in some circumstances they may work. So I don't know if Councillor Tapanos wants to put that in as an amendment, but I would certainly support an amendment to that effect, just to keep this broad and open and to give it the community consultation that I think it deserves.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Are there any other speakers on this item?
Well, I know I haven't typed it up, but I will move that as an amendment, just a couple of words to that dot point.
Yeah, what are your words?
To just be all
are you
options.
are you unmuted? Okay,
to just include all options. Yeah, all options.
Point of order, they've already been explored. The shared path option has already been explored. Yeah. It's well and truly explored.
Let's maybe actually get some advice on this, because this does have a bit of a long and protracted
This is a specific report to get, it's a report to get information on something different, which is on-road protected bikelands within the vicinity of Kent Road, which we haven't done.
Okay, let's just get some advice, Greg or Anita, just because we've been working on this, about perhaps some of the work that has already been undertaken, looking at things in this area.
Thanks, Mayor. So, councillors, you'll recall that there were 6 different cross-sections that were considered 12 months ago, I think it was, maybe 13 months ago now, for Kent Road, and a decision was made to go with the trail. In fact, I think it was 2 years ago, I apologise. The idea of looking at separated road bike lanes in the vicinity of Kent Road, I think it would be useful to clarify how close we're talking. So that might be a useful clarification if we are having this amendment there.
2 kilometre radius.
So can I just hang on? This amendment has already been adopted into the substantive. Is that something that can be worked out outside of this council meeting, the specifics?
Look, I'm happy to explore it, because I think
Thank you.
the work that does happen.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. So we'll get back into this, and I'll see if there are any final speakers on this motion. If not, we haven't actually had a speaker against the officer recommendation, so there's no amended officer recommendation, so there's no right of reply. So we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour of this amended officer recommendation? All those against? I'll call for a division. Yep, so all those in favour were Councillor Tapanos, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Hart, Councillor Yildiz and Councillor Bolton. That's what I'm doing right now. All those against are Councillor Pulford, Councillor Conlon, myself, and Councillor Riley. So that has been one. And now we will move, thank you, councillors, firstly for the debate. And now we'll move on to item 7.2, which is the Coburg Bluestone Cottage Complex redevelopment. Are there any conflicts of interest to disclose? No, if not, I see Councillor Tapanos had already stood up.
I have a slightly altered recommendation to what's in the agenda. And I know that there's been some emails floating around, so...
Yes, please.
Sorry, thank you. I've got an altered recommendation from what's printed in the agenda, and for the benefit of councillors, it was the most recent one circulated at 7:41 p.m. So I think we've got that, and it might also require some little some updating of the figures in point 5 as well. But effectively, this is a really
We need the time off.
this has been a really difficult issue for council, partly because I think all of us here really want to support the Bluestone Cottage that we have, which we've never invested money in before, or not for many years. And we want to support the great work that the Historical Society does. And we see great potential in future works and expansion, particularly with the Coburg Health Precinct and everything that's happening in this precinct. The Historical Cottage...
Councillor Tapanos, sorry to interrupt you. We just need to make sure that you've actually got a seconder for that. Sorry. It's up on the screen if councillors want to read it. All right, Councillor Hart will second it. Thanks.
Yeah, so it is a really difficult decision for us, even though we recognise, and all of us do, the great asset that will be created here. And it's partly difficult because construction costs have gone so expensive, and it is works that we haven't budgeted for and we didn't foresee in previous years. So as a council, you know, we have an issue to determine how much money we want to spend on this project. And I think that's first and foremost. And then we want it to be the best it possibly can be, and we agree with the vision of the Historical Society, but within those budget parameters. So this is just the beginning. Of course, there is a lot of design work, which will include things around the air conditioning and the internal amenity. But really what we really want to set tonight is a budget, and we want to get the most floor space as possible within those budget parameters. So it does change the recommendation significantly. It does call for a greater annex, which, you know, will be between 155 square metres and up to 195 square metres, again, depending on those budget parameters. And it does talk about an annex that could be a meeting space, could be a workstation, does have DDA toilets, it is about display and it is about storage. But again, it says, please stick within that budget. Compared to what is listed in the agenda, I'm proposing a budget of $4.2 million as a maximum to spend on this project. And because we are going with the option 2, we have decreased the car parking spots from 12 to 10. So there is a little bit of saving there already. So despite that saving, I'm proposing in this motion to set a budget of $4.2 million. And I'm confident with a little bit of work around cost-saving measures, we can get the annex that meets the aspirations of the Historical Society within that budget. And of course, it's also calling for a report to come back to us that would detail some of those savings and that continuous work that needs to happen. So I think this is one that sort of says, yes, we hear you loud and clear. We will do our best to deliver, but there are budget limits, and that limit will have to be $4.2 million in this project. So I commend this as not the perfect solution tonight, but to say that it is the beginning of a process, and this certainly gives us parameters and guidelines to be able to progress this issue into the future.
Thanks, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Hart as the seconder. All right. Yep, Councillor Bolton, what's your amendment?
My amendment is to amend point 2B to change the square meterage to the words at least 175 square metres to 195 square metres.
All right, I'll see if that's acceptable to the mover and the seconder. The mover?
Look, I'm going to accept it.
All right. That's it. That's all I need. Okay. So now that's part of the substantive. So I'll see if there are any speakers against this motion. Any other speakers in favour of this motion? Yes, question?
Does the increase in square meterage increase the flow on cost to council?
Eamon?
Through you, Mayor, I think, so setting...
Wait, Lambros, hold on. Eamon's answering the question.
Setting it up, so that the motion as is proposed, the alternative, setting an upper limiting fee would mean we'd design to that fee. So the square meterage you could get for that amount of money would be what you'd get, but within, I think, what's proposed, which is
The envelope.
the envelope of 175 to 195. Yeah.
Cool. So it's workable within that range. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, so increasing the extra 20 square kilometres is workable within that range.
20 square metres.
Square kilometres. Bit expansionist. All right. Councillor Bolton, you wanted to speak in favour of this?
I would like to speak in favour of
Thank
this
you.
motion because while there have been quite a few meetings between the Quebec Historical Society and the council officers, and I think one or two of the councillors, I think probably it wasn't until after the last council meeting that the Historical Society had the opportunity to actually present what it felt would be workable. And I think I'm not really in favour of just building an expensive storage shed for the Historical Society for their collection. I think it has to include what they attempt to do in very difficult circumstances with the current small size of the annex, of the existing annex, which will be sold off and dismantled and so forth in 12 months' time or so, is if we just, give them the same size or roughly the same size plus enough, plus a little bit extra for a DDA compliant toilet, then we're really just saying you just have to limber on in this same situation. Whereas I think if there is the opportunity to display things properly and be able to do work from the actual, from the centre, as was described by members of the Historical Society earlier, they'll have the opportunity to open the annex and the whole complex for more hours, because at the moment the restricted size of the premises means that they have to take work home with them rather than be able to do the work on site while people are walking around having a look at displays. So I'm in favour of something which is suitable without breaking the bank, and I would point out that none of this is of the Historical Society's making. They inherited a museum from the old Coburg Council, and they've inherited council objects. So, so they're looking after actual council objects, which probably the council should be looking after, and that's probably also cluttering up their space as well. So I definitely support something like this motion, and then if there is a need for further adjustments, I think that those adjustments can come back to the council.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Are there any other speakers on this item? Councillor Conlon?
Yeah, I'll just be quick because I know we're quite behind time. Yeah, just wanted to reiterate that distinction between like storage and display. So I didn't really fully understand that until I visited this week. But essentially, the situation at the moment is that there's this big shed with a lot of a lot of historical items in there, and the volunteers have done really well to sort of squish it all together and allow people to sort of walk through in this kind of very difficult way. So what they're actually asking for is a doubling of the space so that they can actually display the items, because if they don't have that space through the increased sized annex, which they think does need to be around that 195 size, which is a doubling, but there's more than enough space on the land to do that. So it makes sense that if we're building a new shed and we're going to the expense that instead of making it sort of 30 or 50, 30% bigger, we can make it double the size. And because if we don't do that, then it, like Councillor Bolton said, it becomes an expensive storage shed, and then you have to ask the question, well, you may as well store it off-site in a much cheaper way. So I do think, I think it's important to make that clear. And then the other thing is that I'm happy to say that we've been able to work the budget a bit differently and take out firstly, one of the budgets was incorporating the cost of the providing that car parking, which was about $250,000 within the budget envelope for the project. So we've been able to take that sort of an accounting measure and take that out of the budget, so that we've actually sort of increased it by about $250,000 by keeping the same $4.2 million figure, which is good.
Thanks, Councillor Conlon. Any other speakers on this item? Councillor Riley and then Councillor Hart, and then we might put it to the vote.
Yeah, there's a lot I could say. I won't say much except to say that the bigger you make this, the less open space you're going to have, and that was a major consideration for me. So I'm a bit concerned about this latest amendment that's been adopted.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Riley. Councillor Hart, unmute yourself. Thanks.
I just hope this is sort of some way, I think, to get a compromise, I think, between what was being proposed around the option 2 and the option 3. I understand Councillor Riley's concerned about open space. I think this is to try and put some parameters around the size, because it is going to be, you've got to look at the quality of your build and what you need for it, and then obviously around issues around size. But I did feel that option 1 and option 2 wasn't going to meet this need. So obviously we needed to find some way to, I think, cut down from what option 3 was, but to find a way that it balances the quality that's going to be required for what the need of the building is, and also with the space that's required. I also hope that we've got enough room for enough open space as part of this project to balance the size of the building as well. But let's hope that gives the parameters to try and work that through.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Are there any other speakers on this item? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour of this? All those against? That is carried unanimously. Thanks, councillors. So next up we've got item 8.5 in our reordered agenda. I'll just scroll down to it. So that is reinstate postal services to Glenroy. I'll see if there are any conflicts of interest to declare. No, Councillor Hart.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And many thanks to the members of the Save the Glenroy Post Office group that have stayed quite late to have this motion on the floor tonight. And I just want to say that they're just a representation of the large number of people who really participated to Save the Post Office. And on the 25th of August, the Post Office, after 135 years, closed its doors, and it was to the sound of the community actually singing. And the singing, what they said was, they say we don't need our post office. They say that it's surplus to need. And the community had had a very, very short time to organise. As we heard tonight, they organised with petitions, they organised with 3 rallies, they organised with letters to the Board of Australia Post, and they organised with letters to ministers as well. And on the very last day, that was from 4 o'clock onwards, and I think they stayed there for an extra 20 minutes. They were the last stamps that were actually bought at Glenroy Post Office, and the last mail delivery took letters, with stamps for the letters to Albanese and delivery of letters to him. But I also just want to mention the work that council did as that part of that process, and I think what's really important is that it's really great to have community members here tonight come to council, not because there's a complaint about what council's doing, but to really join community and council. And that's what happened around the Save the Glenroy Post Office campaign. And what was really important is that council were able to do things like we had no joy, but we wrote to Michelle Rowlands, the Communications Minister, we wrote to Australia Post, but it was also through council that we did get a joint meeting. We had a meeting with the CEO from council, advocacy person, Kathleen Matthews-Ward, who did an awful lot of work around the campaign, and with a representative from the federal member, Peter Khalil. So it shows that when I think community and council, three tiers of government, are working together, it gives you an opportunity to try and raise things, even though the response of Australia Post was quite appalling. So what this resolution's doing tonight is actually the community are really committed to trying to get a service back into Glenroy. We know that post office is gone, but we heard tonight very clearly the issues for people with disability and the issue of access. That was really fantastic speeches. So what the campaign is seeking to do is to still lobby the minister. We've had Australia Post declare now they're going to want to change some of the regulatory functions because they're making a loss. So I think it's really critical that the community do stay together, and
Thanks,
they're very, very
Councillor
strong
Hart.
in wanting to continue this campaign. The support
Thanks.
of council.
Councillor Hart, you've hit 3 minutes. Please, we've had everyone go over time this evening. We really need to wrap it up.
1 second. The support of council.
Am I the chair of this meeting? Like, come on, we're quite running over time.
To help with that
Councillor
level
Hart.
and support the community in their
Okay.
campaign.
All right. Next time, councillors, when I say that you've hit your 3 minutes, please understand that I'm doing it so we can finish within time. Of course, what you're saying is important, of course, and we all agree with it. But I am lenient with time, so when I say it for a reason as the chair of this meeting. Okay. Now, Councillor Bolton is a seconder. Actually, we'll just clarify what motion it was, Councillor Hart, that you were actually moving. I think there was an alternative, yeah. Yep. Yep, we'll just make sure that's on the board.
No, it's not. Yeah, that's it now.
Great. Okay. Councillor Bolton is a seconder. And just unmute yourself, please. Thanks.
I'd like to certainly support all of the comments that have been made by Councillor Hart, but I'd like to draw people's attention to the last part of the motion about getting data from Australia Post about the number of inaccessible as well as accessible post offices in Merri-bek, because about 5 years ago there was a complaint from the Disability Reference Group to the council about the number of post offices in Brunswick that are inaccessible. These are all the licensed post offices, which basically means franchise post offices. Now we've got a similar situation in Glenroy, and probably all over Merri-bek and probably all over Australia, where we've got a lot of inaccessible post offices. And at the protest on the last day of operation of the post office before it closed, I was talking to a taxi driver who drives an accessible taxi. He used to bring everyone in a wheelchair to the Glenroy Post Office because it had a great ramp for people who were in wheelchairs or mobility scooters or whatever. He can't take them to Oak Park or Hadfield because of the steps. Even Broadmeadows isn't as safe as all of that because it's in the shopping centre. You have to traverse the car park. And I also think that it would be useful for council officers to make contact with the Australia Post Disability and Inclusion team about this very issue. And one of the members of the Merri-bek Council's Disability Reference Group suggested that council do that because they think that might be a bit of a lever to try and get a postal service back which is accessible in the Glenroy area, especially as this is public transport hub also, and Beres in particular earlier was just talking about the difficulty of accessing post offices nearby by public transport, especially if you need accessibility, as in they're inaccessible, you can't use them. So I'd like to, commend the motion. And the campaign is now fighting to win back the services. They're inspired by the campaign at Sebastopol in Ballarat. And I think the campaign's already had an impact. It's forced Australia Post not to back down on its decision yet, but it's forced them to respond, which is more than they have to the other community campaigns to try and save post offices. So I think the campaign's already kicked goals, and but we obviously want to win, so the campaign's ongoing.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Are there any speakers against this motion? Any other speakers in favour of this motion? Councillor Yildiz?
Mayor, I understand and acknowledge the time, but I just want to thank the residents. I want to thank the politicians, and in particular Councillor Hart. I'm absolutely dumbfounded with the arrogance. Australia Post continues to be inefficient and are losing money by the hour, but no wonder why. If you keep closing post offices and you remove people's access to a service, what do you expect? But post offices aren't just about sending letters. People think, oh yeah, just go there. It's not about that. And banks and post offices are punishing residents for using their services. All I can say is more strength to the residents, more strength to those that are fighting this. I feel as though we are losing, we've lost the battle, but I think residents need to keep going. And I think this motion yet again says we need to keep going. And all I can say is more power to you. But I just hope someone at Australia Post is losing some sleep and they get up and they hopefully have a bit of they do have a bad dream, a nightmare, and they do reverse this decision.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Are there any other speakers on this item? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour of this motion? All those against? That is carried unanimously. Thanks, councillors, and thanks to everybody who took the time to come in this evening as well. So next up, we'll go back up in the agenda to item 7.4. Just scrolling up. No, 7.4, because we're still rejigging things. So this is 2023 to 2030 Arts and Culture Strategy. I'll see if there are any conflicts to disclose. If not, do I have a motion? Councillor Bolton, to move something? We'll see. We'll just make sure it's up on the screen.
I'd like to move the motion, which is actually an amalgamation of Councillor Pulford's motion.
Excellent. So, Councillor Pulford, you're happy to second? Excellent. We'll get that up on the screen and then we'll start. Go ahead.
And just two extra words, which is not controversial, to add the word in addition for point 2.
In it before point 2?
It's just recognising that this wasn't consulted on.
Okay. Councillor Pulford? That's fine? Great. Okay, Councillor Bolton.
Yes, I'd like to commend the Arts and Culture Strategy to councillors.
Your microphone. Sorry, they can't hear you.
I'd like to commend the Arts and Culture Strategy to councillors, and no doubt other councillors will also flesh out the strategy a little bit more in discussion. But in particular, I'd like to commend the emphasis on trying to do more activity in the north and support arts and culture in the northern part of the municipality, where often people in the past have felt very ignored. And I felt that it was important to include here
they can't hear you. Yeah.
The Arts Centre in the north would be in Fawkner or Glenroy, and that it would be, it's envisaged, at the moment it's very early stages and there will be more discussion and consultation about it, but it's envisaged that this will be an indoor performance space and creative production space, subject to future community conversation and discussion. But also, the motion adds an extra point about acknowledging recent community requests, and I think a couple of them are still here.
Still late.
Still here. Recent community requests from people involved with Coburg High School, and we've heard from a parent and a student tonight, where they, they are desperate for a performing arts facility in Merri-bek Council, where which could be a shared facility between the high school and the community, and they're seeking council support. And I think this is where council can show support, because you're more likely to get state government funding if the council indicates support, and something like a project like this would need state government funding. But also the council is looking at options for improving the Coburg Town Hall as part of its community infrastructure plan in the future, and actually turning the Coburg Town Hall into a performance space, and not just the echoey chamber that it is at the moment. At the moment, you definitely couldn't use it for a performance facility. And so I think the options are open, and the object of putting in the consideration of a performance space, which involved Coburg High School and Coburg Town Hall, is not to undercut a performing arts space in the north, but it is looking at all of the options. It's in addition to a performing arts centre in the northern municipality.
Thank you,
I'll leave it
Councillor
there.
Bolton. Councillor Pulford is the seconder.
I don't have much to add, and I think when it was
Gemma.
Microphone.
Oh man, so sorry. Don't have much more to add. When I answered Gemma's question, I feel like I made the points I wanted to make, but I hope people support this tonight. And thank you for Nat, the school president and former councillor, for reaching out on this issue, and Gemma and Sam as well for attending tonight.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Pulford. Are there any speakers against this motion? Any other speakers on this motion? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, and I will be brief. And I'm
Please.
pleased to see the inclusion around Coburg High in this, and particularly it's an addition to one of the highlights, I think, of the arts and cultural strategy has been around the intent to develop a performing arts centre and in the north. And that's obviously been looking more around the very north and looking at Faulkner and Gloro. But that's really been a wonderful part of this strategy, and a lot of work. And I really do want to commend it. I think this has been a fantastic process of bringing together, ensuring that the development of this strategy was also done through other reference groups, and a really very comprehensive engagement process. Just other parts of that strategy are increased employment for First Nations, emphasis around public art, and particularly around access to spaces and funding for artists, and also increases in cultural program. So I think a really, really good strategy moving forward, and really commend that, and then the addition of what we as a council can achieve working in collaboration with Coburg High and with other, hopefully, potential funders.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Are there any other speakers on this item? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. Thanks, councillors, and thanks to our one remaining person in the gallery. All right, so up to 7.9 now, which is the naming of laneways. Are there any conflicts of interest to disclose? If not, could I please have a motion? Councillor Riley, and let's just clarify what that motion is.
Yeah, look, I've circulated it today, and it's got an adjustment for point 4, but also a couple of extra points that Councillor Davidson also has made as well.
Great, so I'll see Councillor Davidson. Would you like to second that then?
Yes, I would, if those amendments have been included.
Yeah, they are.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Yeah, look, this is a little bit complicated because we have to do this work within the bounds of the Geographic Names Victoria, and a couple of the recommendations are to address the speaker tonight for the Pagoni laneway and the history of their family there. So thank you to them coming in tonight and speaking to that. That was to Irini. And also there's another laneway regarding the Castoria Lane, which has also been something that we've been considering. So really happy to support those. With the Sunshine Lane one, that's actually a laneway between Ann Street and Trafford Street in Brunswick, just sort of between Victoria and Albert Street. It's a very significant laneway in terms of the public art or the gorilla art that goes up there, but a lot of people do visit it. It's somewhat stands up against some of the laneways in the city, the CBD, which attract a lot of tourists and so on. So the idea behind this tonight with this amendment is to go out to get our community to name this laneway so that we can actually direct people there. Maybe we can even pursue this, not in this amendment tonight or this meeting, in this recommendation tonight, but maybe we could start to develop a map like we've done for breweries and for historic sites and so on. We've done 3 maps around our city this year, which would be nice perhaps to do another one. So it would allow us to do that because we could name it, people could find it. So I just want to commend the officers for their work on this and for the suggestion of doing this. And just to, I'll let Councillor David speak to her, but really the wayfinding that covers just makes a lot of good sense. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Riley. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, my amendment goes to something a little different, and I think Council had supported this some time ago. And for example, on Chapman Avenue, there's the name Chapman Avenue, and beneath it is an explanation of who Mr. Chapman was and why we have called it Chapman Avenue. And I think bringing the reasoning behind the chosen names to the forefront of people's attention is very important, because a name is just a word until it has the substance and the history behind it, which gives a whole nother light to the reasons why that name was particularly chosen and its relevance to the local area and to the people. So, for example, naming streets or naming parks and the reasons why those names were chosen is very important. It's all very well to have a whole policy about why we've chosen names, but unless the community knows the story and the history behind that name, it's something that becomes a little bit obsolete. So my 2 points in there allow for informative text beneath road names and newly named parks to be included, so that we have an understanding of our history and that can be taught and carried through.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Are there any speakers against this motion? Any other speakers in favour of this motion? Okay, Councillor Bolton and Councillor Tapanos. Yep.
Just really quickly, I mean, I think this speaks to Councillor Davidson's comments just then. Hearing the story about the proposal for Pagoni Lane from Irini really brought the whole, you know, the role of her mother and the connection of her mother with the lane to life. And I'm really so pleased that Irini came to the meeting tonight to actually explain that history. I think it really made a big difference to us understanding why, you know, item 3 is in this motion. So I think I definitely do support that as much as I can. And I've actually been approached about another lane as well. So I'll pass that through to council officers. I'm not sure the process for nominating the naming of a lane. Like it doesn't talk about that in the actual motion itself. But anyway, I'll pass that on to officers soon.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Tapanos, and then we might wrap it up on this one. Thank you.
Just to say, thank you. Just to say, I'm really pleased with this report and the additional amendments, which have been fantastic, and I really echo the sentiments of Councillor Davidson as well, because sometimes we just look at the name and we do need to tell their history as well. And I think that there's innovative ways we can do that. And the more information we give our community, the more that sense of place starts being developed. But just to say, these are 3 community suggestions that have come to council, and they're 3 great laneways in our city. The first one we've just resurfaced as well, so the Historian Association will be very pleased. They have their entrance off this laneway, and they have been sort of advocating for this change for many years as well, and recognising that community in that place where they have the building and they have their community functions is really significant. The one with the artwork, again, really significant because people come and visit. And of course, the laneway that comes off Sydney Road, a major activity centre, and as Irene eloquently told us the story of her mother and her contribution to the textiles industry, specifically in Brunswick, but also outside of Brunswick as well. It's such a moving story. Now, I just wanted to emphasise that this is the beginning of a process, and this was a while ago, but all the suggestions, and I hope we find a really good one for the laneway with the artwork, are great, and I hope that they do get supported. Our policy talks about recognising our multicultural community, and specifically women, and getting Irene's suggestion just speaks to our policy, because we've had that criteria in our policy for over 20 years. And I just can't think at the moment, or there might be 1 or 2, but I think we really haven't followed it. And sometimes those stories, despite the fact that they're so significant, they're not told because migrant communities have language barriers, or there's people with language barriers. They're the untold stories that we need to know about and need to find out about. So it's great if this goes through and is adopted, to be able to honour a woman, a migrant, a designer who lived in this area and made a contribution as a migrant worker, someone that you would normally be recognising because they get Olympic gold medalists and prime ministers and sports stars. But in a way, we've had a lot of that. We need to tell the stories of the people who really made a contribution to the municipality, and that is the migrants of the 50s and 60s and 70s who worked in the industrial areas, who built up the suburb, and who've left the legacy that needs to be told.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any other speakers on this item? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. Okay, we are now going to move back up to item 7.3. And so that is the hard waste trial outcomes and service recommendations. Any conflicts to disclose? No. I did see Councillor Davidson. Would you like to move this? Okay, I did see your hand first. Councillor Riley to second. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. So I'd like to move the officer report as read on page 83. The recommendation is to adopt an ongoing booked hard waste collection service. And it's something that we've trialled, and I think the success of this has been quite resounding. The council trial of the booked hard waste service was able to put residents in contact with organisations which was able to then divert tonnes of waste to recycling or reuse streams. And council can support residents to rehome or repair their goods or keep them circulating within the community. And the nature of the booking system supports the prevention of dumped rubbish, which is something that council's really tackled for a very long time. So for example, when someone's moving house, they're able to call council and say, hey, I'm moving house soon, can you come and collect some goods? Or council might be able to say, well, here you can be linked up with the Salvation Army or another organisation to help reuse items that they might not be wanting to take with them. But I think one of the greatest strengths of this service, to book the hard waste collection service, is that we're able to help people through our home maintenance team provide assistance to their clients when, say, someone might say, I need help I've got an old couch, I need help taking it outside. And our home maintenance team are able to go there and provide that individualised service. So that's probably one of the greatest strengths to me that speaks resounding strength of this this booked service. Sorry. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Riley.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Just further to your comments, I endorse all of those. This motion also addresses the need for those properties that aren't paying a curbside waste charge, that they can actually pay for a service, which is a really good additional service that we'll be able to offer. It's really important to understand that you can only put out 2 washing machine size loads. Most people probably exceed that from my view, but we're very generous in that, but it's pretty important that you do that. But in saying that, you can do that twice a year, so 2 washing machine size loads of stuff on your property twice a year, or you can just do 1 with 2 of those amounts. But given that, it's really important that we're not doing a whole council-wide service anymore where we all chuck our stuff out and hopefully get to reshare, reuse and all that sort of stuff. But you can do that on this sort of booking system. It still allows that. But we really do need people to be aware that if you miss your service, you're going to end up having a lot of build-up, and then you're not using it on an annual basis. You're not going to get a lot of room to be able to add onto that, and you'll end up dumping on us. So what we need to do, and what we saw in the transition, which concerns me, is that well over half the community did not use it in this trial. So you need to keep using it every year. If you don't, you're going to end up having a big build-up of waste and reusing and so on. So just a word of caution around that, because it's just something we all need to support each other to do. But this is also addressing the education side of it, and we need to make sure we are endorsing tonight a plan to really get to culturally and linguistically diverse communities, older people, people with disabilities, and people who aren't savvy with digital online computers and so on. So that's a really important stream of this. But it's also encouraging us to rehome and repair goods. So you can use the services like Ryman, which is the Rotary Inn of Melbourne Emergency Relief Network, to offer your working goods, because they go off to homes that really need them for people who are homeless or coming out of prison or whatever, or escaping domestic violence. But also using garage sales and repair cafes like the Tool Library in Brunswick. So there's lots of things in this, but I also just want to shout out to the fact that at our reception area, as you come in here and at Brunswick and up at the Glenroy Library as well, our community hub, there's a recycling site there for specialty things like phones, globes and all sorts of things that you cannot recycle or put into our service. So I just wanted to mention that, because that's a really important part of the education.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Are there any speakers against this motion? Any speakers in favour of this motion? Councillor Bolton? Thanks.
So I'm in favour of the motion, but I would like to urge a word of caution, because I've received a number of complaints, mainly from Faulkner and Glenroy, about the fact that someone does a booked hard rubbish collection and it takes the company so long, like sometimes up to 3 months, to clear it, that lots of other people add things and it becomes a general, like the old hard rubbish collections we used to do, which creates it sort of creates a sort of dumping ground. I've had, well, I mean, not stacks and stacks of complaints, but I've certainly had several. So I just think we need to keep an eye on it. I mean, generally I'm a support of this, but I just think we need to keep a little bit of an eye on it.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Davidson?
Clarify something through the acting mayor. With the booking service that we currently have, what's the average turnaround time, and is that done in-house? That's in-house, isn't it? No, that's external, sorry. Yeah.
Certainly, people book according to a certain date. So when they ring up to book, they're given a date date, or they go into the online system and they take a date, and that might be 3 or 4 weeks out, but once they've got that date, that's the date that they're to put their waste out. Now, some people put their waste out straight away before they've got their sticker, and that's not what the intention is. So, but once you've got your date, they're pretty close to picking it up within a week or so of that date.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Anita. Are there any other speakers on this item? Put it to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. Now we are at 9:55, so I'll need an extension of time to 10:30. Moved by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Hart. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. Yes, so if councillors can please stick to 2 minutes when they're speaking, I feel like that might actually get us done tonight. Yep, okay, so 7.5 is our draft allocation and use of sporting facilities, grounds and pavilions policy. Any conflicts on this? No? Do I have a mover? Councillor Tapanos
I'll
to
move
move.
the officer recommendation, and just to mention that it still is in a draft format, so we look forward
Okay,
to
I need a seconder though. Councillor Pulford to second, so Councillor Tapanos, was that all you wanted to say? Cool, Councillor Pulford?
Yeah, thanks to the officers for their work on this. Thanks to the officers for their work on this, because I know that they reached out to, I think, pretty much every club in our community, so it was a lot of work and appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Are there any speakers against this item? Any other speakers on this item? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. Item 7.6 is the summer 2023 to 24 sports ground tenancy allocations. Any conflicts to disclose? Okay, do I have a motion? Councillor Tapanos?
I don't need to speak.
Is it just the officer recommendation?
Yes, please.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Davidson to second. Anything to add?
No. I look forward to all these clubs meeting in their capacity.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Davidson. So if there's any other speakers on this item? No? All right, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. Item 7.7 is the short stay accommodation estimates and options. Any conflicts on this one? No, I saw Councillor Pulford had a hand up. Can you confirm what you're moving and make sure your microphone's on?
I'm going to move a slightly amended one, an alternate. So it's been circulated. It's a change to point 3. Rather than just receiving a report in February 2024, these amendments would see council support, in principle, charging a fee and applying a cap on the total number of days per year a property can be used for short stay accommodation.
Great. Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Conlon to second. Councillor Pulford as the mover.
Thank you. So this is a report coming back to council after, at an earlier meeting this year, we asked for officers to look into what we could do to help with the housing affordability crisis in our city. We know that there's properties being used for short stay accommodation, and there's cities and jurisdictions around the world that are implementing policy measures to try and encourage less properties to be in short stay and instead in long-term accommodation, which would increase the supply of properties, which could help people find a home, but also help reduce pressure on the rental market because rents are rising like crazy at the moment. So I believe that we should join City of Melbourne in expressing in providing our in-principle support for not only just levying a fee, but also putting a cap on the total number of days, because really, excuse me.
A bit quiet, like if you're going to have to whisper, just whisper properly. Please.
Sorry, it just was getting too loud. I can't concentrate. Basically, if we really, the report makes it clear that a levy is not necessarily the best measure alone, because it might be hard to enforce, or it would depend on people kind of opting in voluntarily or owning up to having a short stay accommodation. And if this was about addressing housing affordability, it's actually the cap on the number of days a year that could see more properties shift from short stay to long term. So I think the cap is an important part of this. I think if we're going to put in a cap, we may as well charge a levy because we may as well raise some money, but I don't think we should enforce that. But I hope councillors support this tonight. The report would come back in February, which would give time for the state government's housing package, which we expect to be announced next month, which might include something like this, as well as the report from City of Melbourne, which I think is coming in November and February as well.
Thanks, Councillor Pulford. Councillor Conlon as the seconder. Any speakers? Question? Yep.
Question to officers, actually.
Yes.
I'm just
you're on.
wondering if, in the preparation of this report, if we talk to Yarra Council, because earlier this year I'm aware that they started taxing or made a decision to tax Airbnb and create an emergency fund for renters struggling with the cost of living crisis.
Okay, so did we talk to Yarra? Yep. Yes, okay, we did talk to Yarra.
Exactly is the outcome?
Councillor Bolton, through you, Mayor. Officers have consulted comprehensively with councils across the state in terms of this particular topic. A number of councils are looking at implementing what's currently proposed on the screen. A number of different mechanisms, a number of different topics in terms of how those funds might potentially be allocated are also being contemplated by a number of councils. So I won't speak specifically to the Yarra City Council example, but I can reassure you that officers do share information across councils very regularly.
Great. Are there speakers against? Okay, in favour?
Thank you. I'm speaking in favour of this as well.
Yep.
I'm speaking in favour of this and recognising that we are in a housing crisis, and that is a crisis of demand and supply. And the more properties we have that are used up in short-term rentals and are unoccupied and are just sitting there vacant and derelict, that is what is contributing to the housing crisis as well, because each one of those could be leased out on a long-term rental. So in principle, I support this wholeheartedly. I need to clarify a couple of things for my understanding of this. A local government does not levy taxes. This is not a tax. That is the responsibility of other levels of government. One of the models which is being investigated is having a local law which requires Airbnb or short-term rentals to register. That would be optional and there would be a small fee. It doesn't really solve the problem. A small fee, especially one that's optional, is not going to achieve what we're seeking and not going to address the housing affordability. So I think that in many respects, I support the sentiments of where this is going, but this is something that's not in the realm, I think, of local government, and this is something that the state government needs to step in and implement things like caps, which we've seen in other cities around the world, where they've said if you have a house, you can only lease it on short-term platforms for 6 months or 3 months, and that way you encourage people to put it on the long-term rental lease. Charging them an extra $100 is not going to solve the issue. So I'm hoping that this motion is successful, and the right reason I'm supporting it today will generate a debate in the community and at different levels of government, and that debate could lead to some legislation which could achieve what we want to achieve. I hope that that would occur before February, and the February report tells us you don't need to do anything, it's taken care of. Because I do think the best people to deal with this issue is actually not us, it's actually a different level of government. And it's quite rare that I say that, because normally the best people to deliver services to the community and to implement things locally is local government, but in this case, it's one that we need state government to step up and take this on board. So for me, it's more of an advocacy thing than anything else.
Thanks, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any other speakers on this item? No, if not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? Is that 2 abstentions? Okay, we might note that down. That's fine. 2 abstentions. All right, next is item 7.8, and that is the Parklet Program Review. Any conflicts of interest on this? All right, do I have a motion? Thanks, Councillor Davidson to move, Councillor Yildiz to second. Councillor Davidson?
Yep, I'm happy to move the motion as read on page 152 of the officer report.
Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Yildiz, nothing to add. Anybody against this motion? Any other speakers in favour of this motion? Put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. We've already done 7.9, so now we're up to 7.10, which is the revised street numbering policy. Any conflicts of interest? Do I have a motion? Yep, so Councillor Pulford to move, Councillor Bolton to second. Councillor Pulford?
I believe this is just largely updating the policy, removing a bunch of information that would normally go on a procedure. So it's kind of a technical change.
Thanks, Councillor Pulford. Councillor Bolton? Nothing to add. Any speakers against this? Anyone else in debate? No. All right, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. Next is 7.11, which is the proposed sale of land at 2 Spry Street, Coburg North. Any conflicts of interest for councillors? No. If not, do I have a motion? And we'll also need some names.
Can I move the motion and recommend the ward councillors?
Yep, and Councillor Pulford, are you okay to chair it? Great. Okay, so Councillor Tapanos to move, Councillor Hart to second. Are there any speakers against this motion? Oh, sorry. Would you like to speak on this
Just
motion?
for
Sorry,
members of the gallery. A few years ago, we purchased a great parcel of land which abutted the creek, which we thought was really important for our creek corridor and to create passageways and accesses to the creek. And it's achieved its objective. On that parcel of land, there was a dwelling, a very beautiful dwelling, but one that is tired and needs repair. And now what this report is calling for is to begin the process to carve that out and put it back on the market, so we can actually have a dwelling that goes back on the market, and hopefully someone will buy it and restore it, and we'll be able to live in there. And I know it's only one dwelling, but it goes towards that housing affordability issue, because this dwelling has been derelict and vacant for many years. So we're hopefully we've made a determination, but it doesn't need further open space, and the best use is to put it back on the market and enable hopefully someone to buy it, restore it and live in it.
Thanks, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Hart as a seconder, nothing to add. Are there any speakers against this motion? Any other speakers in favour of this motion? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. 7.12 is the proposed right-of-way discontinuance and sale adjoining 47 and 45 Clarence Street in Brunswick East. Any conflicts of interest? No. And just a reminder that we'll need some names. So I see Councillor Riley's got his hand up to move. Can I confirm which councillors you're nominating?
Yeah, I'm wanting to move the officer recommendation in the South Ward councils, and I'm happy to chair if the other councillors are happy with that.
Yep, Councillor Conlon.
Oh, we only
that's
need
fine.
3 of us, so that's myself.
Yeah. Yeah, Councillor Tapanos was ducked out for a second, so I'll presume that's fine. And so do you have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Conlon to second. Councillor Riley?
Yeah, look, just to say this is starting a process to discontinue some rights of way which are right in the back of people's properties. There's a bit of issues around boundaries and things, but I think it's something we should be pursuing, so recommend it. Thanks.
Councillor Conlon is the seconder? just yes. Thanks. Are there any speakers against this? Your mic?
I'll vote against this. I mean, I can see a certain logic to it because the land has been occupied, but I just hate this creeping privatisation of public space, so I'm going to vote against it.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Are there any speakers in favour of this? No, you haven't spoken yet. You just said yes. That's fine. If you wish to speak in favour, you can.
Yeah, I want to outline my thinking in that it's a small parcel of land, but what we're doing here is to help resolve a dispute or an issue between two neighbours. So I'm comfortable in this scenario. I have similar sentiments to Councillor Bolton that I am reluctant to sell off council land. But in terms of this sort of small issues where it's like an issue between neighbours where like a laneway has been, occupied for a long time, and it sort of makes sense to formalise an arrangement that's already there. I'm comfortable with doing that.
Thanks, Councillor Conlon. So with that, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That was carried with, yes. So we'll get a division on that one. Just for brevity, we'll just say Councillor Bolton voted against that. Thank you. So next is 7.13, and that is the 2022 to 23 financial statements and performance statements. Any conflicts of interest? No, and I see that Councillor Riley is standing up to move that. I'll see if you've got a seconder. Councillor Davidson to second. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Yep. Look, I just wanted to speak very briefly to this. This is a pretty important quarterly report because it comes off the back of the timing of 30th of June, which is pretty important in terms of the annual sort of statements. The Audit and Risk Committee have also signed off on those in terms of their analysis as well, which is really important. And we've landed a $1.76 million unrestricted surplus, which is pretty important given the sort of commitments tonight to spend money on on the Bluestone Cottage and that piece of land adjacent to this site we're standing on tonight. So those kind of things are really valuable, and that's not an easy thing to pull off. Just to commend the staff and the CEO and all of the directors for their work on that work. That will go to our significant project reserve of $1 million worth, but the other $760,000 will go towards capital work programs and contingencies. But there's a few other details in there which I won't read out, but encourage people to look at. However, I do want to draw people's attention to the fact that the indicators in this report are all green for the 22-23 year. So all of the VAGO indicators that look at the sustainability and the performance of councils, we're getting green lights on. But not only are we getting green lights on for this current financial year that's just passed, we're getting green lights on our long-term risk indicators as well. So that is no mean feat either, and I just want to commend the officers for their work in this regard. It's not an easy thing to pull off when we've just come out of COVID, when CPI is rising and all sorts of pressures are on us around infrastructure costs have gone up 20, 30% in the last few years. It's incredibly tight. So to get this kind of result is worth noting and worth celebrating. So I just wanted to note that this is a really excellent report and something that Merri-bek can be somewhat proud of tonight. And it also puts us in very good stead to be able to deal with some of the challenges of the future. And I think we should look to seriously going into getting going to debt and loaning some money to get some of those key things we need to get going on our books. And I say that advisedly because I'm not interested in just going to debt for the sake of it. We've got some really important projects we need to do, and I think we should really seriously look at going into borrowing to get some of those things achieved. Like Central Coburg, which has been sitting there like that for way too long. But there are many other things as well, like Merri-bek affordable housing.
Thanks, Councillor Riley. Councillor Davidson is a seconder.
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any speakers against this report? Any other speakers on this report? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried unanimously. 7.14 is procurement exemption. EXE-2023-471 addressed mail services. Any conflicts on this? Do we have a motion? Councillor Pulford to move. We have a seconder. Councillor Riley to second. Councillor Pulford.
This is just to make sure we can send mail.
Sorry. Councillor Riley is the seconder? No, okay. Any speakers against this? Any other speakers on this? No, all right, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried unanimously. 7.15 is the Merri Creek Management Committee, future funding agreement options and council alignment. Are there any conflicts of interest? No. All right, do I have a motion? Councillor Conlon to move, Councillor Bolton to second. Councillor Conlon?
Happy to move the officer recommendation, which notes that council will be exploring the option 1 that's outlined in there, which is a 3-year agreement which commits to, I'm pretty sure it's the same amount of funding that we're currently giving them. And I'm happy with that because it's better than the options 2 and 3, which were, I think one was private contracting out a lot of the work that Merri Creek Management Committee does. So basically this motion, or the option 1, continues the current type of funding that we are giving towards Merri Creek Management Committee.
Thanks, Councillor Conlon. Councillor Bolton is the seconder.
Won't have anything.
Any speakers against this? Any other speakers on this item? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. 7.16 is next, and that's the Governance Report, September 2023, Cyclical Report. Any conflicts of interest? Do I have a motion? Councillor Riley to move. Any seconder, please? All right, Councillor Yildiz to second. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Mayor. Just to say this is our omnibus report, which brings a lot of things together so we can sort of deal with them in a fairly judicious way. There's some reports from the Sustainability to Transport Advisory Committee, the Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee, and the Arts Advisory Committee. And that one's a really important one because we're acquiring more work for our Merri-bek art collection, one of which I mentioned earlier in the acknowledgements tonight in the passing of one of those artists. But there are other significant First Nations people's artworks in there as well. I encourage people to read that and have a look at that, as well as people from cultural and linguistically diverse backgrounds, which is really exciting to see. There are also other recommendations in there for those acquisitions that we're making, plus some notes on our records of meetings and question times that we normally sort of include here that we don't get to answer in the chamber. They go into here for transparency. And then there's also exercising our powers, conferring planning powers for under the Planning Environment Act 1987. So that's something we do regularly too. So it's really just a way of doing all of that work. So just really emphasising the work of our advisory committees, particularly tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Riley. Councillor Yildiz is a seconder. Nothing to add. Any speakers against this? Any other speakers on this? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried unanimously. 7.17 is Contract Award PA-2023-476, Managed Services Program Provider for Contingent Labour. Any conflicts of interest on this? No. Do I have a mover? Councillor Bolton to move. A seconder? Councillor Pulford to second. Councillor Bolton?
Taken as read.
Councillor Pulford? Any speakers against this? Any speakers on this at all? No? All right, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried unanimously. Next is 7.18, Contract Variation, Contract 493T, Managed Network Infrastructure and Services. Any conflicts of interest? Do I have a motion? Please. Councillor Pulford to move. Anyone to second? Councillor Davidson to second. Councillor Pulford? Councillor Davidson?
Likewise.
Great. Any speakers against this? Any speakers on this at all? No? All right, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against, that's carried unanimously. Next is 7.19, contract variation, contract 711T, cloud infrastructure services. Any conflicts of interest? Do I have a motion? Councillor Pulford to move. A seconder? Councillor Davidson to second. Councillor Pulford?
Take it as read.
Councillor Davidson?
Likewise.
Any speakers against? Any other speakers on this? No? All right, we'll put that one to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. So, we're up to notices of motion, and it's 10:20. So I will just ask for another extension of time until 11. Councillor Riley to move, Councillor Pulford to second. All those in favour? Great, that's been carried. Okay, so our first notice of motion is 8.1, and that is refreshing Merri-bek's commitment to food system strategy 2020 to 2024. Any conflicts on this? No? All right, Councillor Riley, this is your motion. I'll see if you've got a seconder. Is there a seconder for this notice of motion? Councillor Pulford, Councillor Riley.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Pulford. Look, we have a food systems strategy that we started to work on the beginning of the last term of council, the prior term of council. And in fact, Councillor, or former Councillor Bood, who was here, was one of the key drivers in sort of pulling that together. So this is building on that. We're already doing that, but the work is coming out of the food networks and advocacy groups to try and make sure that we extend this work, so it's not just local governments doing this. Many of us have taken the lead. Merri-bek's one of them, but there are others as well. This is also about acknowledging the right to food, getting a Victorian food system up, and also looking towards federal initiatives in this regard and having them all sort of work together. With the climate crisis, with the cost of food, with the pressures on our productive farmland because of all of the housing and development that's going on, and the sort of ever-increasing expansion of Melbourne's metro boundaries under successive Liberal, National and ALP governments. I think we really need to put the pressure on all of our levels of government to make sure that we're actually delivering food, make sure everyone's fed and they're able to find that food. So we have some really good services in our community here that offer that. We have a lot of people growing food and producing it in community gardens and backyards, and this is all about continuing to support that, and not to mention the bees and all the other insects that we need to have continue that. We're about to go into El Nino, and we've actually just had one of the driest Augusts on record. Did you know that? We just went through one of the driest August on record. So if you think that we've had a really good wet year, I'm telling you, we're about to see some of the worst things. You just have to look at the Northern Territory, Queensland and New South Wales today. Fires all over our country in September. So we've got some really important work to do, and this is another element of trying to address that risk and give people some hope for the future.
Councillor Pulford is the seconder. Great. Are there any speakers against this motion? Any other speakers on this motion? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That was carried unanimously. Next is 8.2, support for neighbourhood houses. Any conflicts to disclose? No. Councillor Bolton, this is your motion.
Yeah, it's the same as
Great,
what's
it's the
printed
same
in
one.
the agenda.
I'll see if you've got a seconder for that. Councillor Conlon to second. Councillor Bolton.
So basically this motion is to receive a report on options for council to provide additional public liability insurance to neighbourhood houses for room hire to community groups. And I was alerted to this issue when one of the neighbourhood houses was put in a position of turning away a lot of different community groups from being able to hold community meetings and other activities in their neighbourhood house. And this was a result of some changes a few years ago, which they only became aware of maybe 12 months or less than 12 months ago, where the council's insurer stopped providing, or I'm not sure exactly how it came about, the council's insurer or the council stopped providing insurance to neighbourhood houses for when they hire out rooms to community groups. And I think different neighbourhood houses have dealt with this situation differently. Some neighbourhood houses have turned a blind eye because they don't want to turn away groups. Other neighbourhood houses so freaked out they've been turning away lots of groups, which means both loss of income but also losing contact with the community. And other neighbourhood houses have had to massively escalate the cost of hiring venues, which also turns away groups as well. So anyway, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I certainly want to see a report to look at the options and look at how we can help the neighbourhood houses, because they're really key parts of our local communities, and we need more access to community venues. It's not sufficient just to have access to council senior citizen centres.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Conlon is the seconder.
No, I support the motion and agree with everything Councillor Bolton said.
Thanks, Councillor Conlon. Any speakers against this motion? Any other speakers on this motion at all? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. Next is 8.3, community support during extreme heat events. Any conflicts to disclose? No. Councillor Bolton, this is your motion. And I believe it's a bit different.
Circulated a subsequent motion which is a little bit more detailed.
Yep, we'll just get that up on the screen and then we'll see if you have a seconder.
Send that if I don't know if
Eve, do you, or Councillor Bolton, do you know what time you sent that?
I have to log back into the computer to find that out.
Oh, all right, Eve's got it and she'll pop it up on the screen.
It was this afternoon, maybe about 4-ish or something, just from memory.
All right, here we go. It's up on the screen, so we'll just confirm that that is.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the one, and we'll see. Like, I'm happy to second this one.
Okay.
Councillor Bolton.
So this is an issue I've raised a number of times ever since we had this massive heat wave in, I can't remember when it was, maybe 2014, when the temperatures were over 40 degrees. There were blackouts, which meant that even people who had air conditioning were suffering incredibly, and people were running out of money going to the pub and cinemas and so forth to try and get cool. So not everyone can afford to do that. And it was really hot at night as well. And so I think, well, I don't know that we'll have this really incredible heat wave, but I'm guessing that we are going to have what the Northern Hemisphere's experienced. And so I think we do need to get prepared, but I actually think we need to be more prepared than what we have been in recent years. And Melbourne has been a bit protected than the heat in recent years. Other parts of Australia have had much worse heat waves than we've had in Melbourne, but I think we're not going to be as lucky this year. And I just don't think it's sufficient just to rely on our libraries, which do so much work, to be the only cool places where people can go and sit for free in Merri-bek. So I would like to get a report about what community centres are available that people can use, but also I'd like my revised motion is asking officers to contact Blacktown City Council in Western Sydney regarding their experience of operating heat refuges or cooling centres as they call them, and also advocating to the state government to update the state heatwave plan to more explicitly state the role of local government in a heat wave, including what resources will be made available to local councils to support the community, including measures such as providing cooling centres, etc. And I gather this question of cooling centres or heat refuges, it does operate in a lot of other parts of the world. It's not common in Australia, and I think because the assumption in Australia has been that people have their own private air conditioning, But as we heard from John Englert earlier, I mean, air conditioning, you've got blackouts, air conditioning doesn't operate. And so I actually think it is time Australia started to look at this question because, you know, some of the temperatures in the Northern Hemisphere are absolutely scary, over 50 degrees in some parts of the world. I just can't even conceive of being alive in that level of temperature. So I'd just like us to be prepared
Thanks.
more than just looking after your neighbour.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I don't have anything to add. I think that summarised it and outlined it quite well. Are there any speakers against this motion?
No, in favour.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
Councillor Tapanos.
Just to say, this is a really great motion, and well done to Councillor Bolton for bringing it here and putting it on our agenda really early on, so we can actually start thinking about how we can address. We can start thinking about how we can address and implement some of this before those big sort of heat days that occur. But just to emphasise a couple of things that I hope will come out of the report is not necessarily having, you know, like a heat refuge, but seeing about how we could empower our libraries. And I know Councillor Bolton said they're not sufficient, but they're not at the moment. But how do we adapt our libraries to be those cooling centres? So I don't envisage that we need to rent a hall or open a town hall and have people just go there. But what we need is activities, later opening hours at the libraries. We need to have cooling centres that are not branded as a refuge, but are branded as a social outlet that's free. And the libraries play a very important role. So I hope that one of the recommendations might be to expand library hours on those extreme heat days to promote our libraries as a place to go. But it doesn't just need to be libraries. It could be a whole range of other services as well. So although we could, this report, you know, the language is around a refuge centre, I really envisage this to be refuge centres across the municipality, which are open later, have proper air conditioning, have backup systems that we heard are so important, and that are promoted as places to go on a hot day. And I think there's a little bit of work and a little bit of thinking, and it doesn't need to cost a lot of money.
Thanks, Councillor Tapanos. Any other speakers on this item? Not. We'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried unanimously. Lastly, so we're up to 8.4, which is pedestrian safety, Pascoe Vale Road, Glenroy Activity Centre. Any conflicts to disclose? No. Councillor Hart, this is your motion. I'll see if you've got a seconder. Councillor Bolton to second. Councillor Hart.
Okay, yeah. Very briefly, I think this builds on a previous motion and work that was done back in May 22, and it's around Pascoe Vale Road. I don't think I need to explain to anyone the concerns of safety around that road. And the previous motion in May 22 was around council recommendation around red light cameras, and there's been no progress on that. But this is to look at other potential safety measures that council to advocate to the Department of Transport and Planning on. And in particularly with Pascoe Vale within the Glenroy Activity Centre, which is a 40k zone at the moment, just between, it's from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. and also up until 3 p.m. on a Saturday. So in terms of other areas of Merri-bek, it's actually a very, very limited time that we've got the 40k zone there. So this motion is to look at the question of extending the times of the zone. It's also, and I want to credit this work that's been done by Walk on Merri-bek, who've done a lot in looking at the statistics for this area, and also the fact, actually picking up on the fact that it's 400 metres, whereas the requirements under Department of Transport and Planning is actually for 500 metres. And also addressing some of the concerns of potential problems with lack of lighting. And there's also just a clause that also enables a little bit of freedom to officers to look at any other measures that may be worthwhile pursuing and investigating, because as soon as you start to talk around Pascoe Vale Road, people have got lots of ideas, lots of different strategies, lots of problem solving. So I think it gives it some flexibility. And I noticed there was a little bit of chat on Facebook about that as soon as this motion appeared. And it's really important to have, I think, that engagement with community, which has been there consistently. Kathleen Matthews' ward did a lot of advocacy in Parliament around the red light cameras as well. But even with that, there's still no progress.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Bolton as a seconder.
Yeah, I use that particular crossing in Glenroy quite a lot, day and night, and I actually definitely think it needs more light, and it's not, it wouldn't interfere with local residences because there aren't, Glenroy is a bit different to Brunswick and Coburg, where you don't have people living above the shops in the main drag, but it's a super busy road. It's the main crossing for people to leave the train station to get to West Glenroy, and it's a much busier train line because it's got, well, it doesn't have more trains at night time. At peak hour it's got more trains, but at night time it's, you know, it's the main area, a way that people get from the train station across the road to get to Glenroy West. But also the 40k speed limit, and the light for the 40k speed limit doesn't seem to operate that often in my experience, unless I don't always notice it. But it's but there's a lot of little shopping centres on much less busy roads that have much more obvious and longer lasting 40k time limits. And this is, Pascoe Vale's a super busy road. It doesn't have trucks because the government years ago removed trucks from the road, like big, you know, semi-trailers from the road, but it's still got a massive, it's got smaller trucks and a massive amount of traffic. It's, you know, I swear it's probably busier than Sydney Road in a lot of places, a lot of the time. So it's sort of, I definitely think the 40k needs to be extended to 9 p.m. every day for, especially because of that link with the train station. So I think this is actually a really excellent motion, and hopefully we can push this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any speakers against this motion? Any other speakers on this motion? If not, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried unanimously. Now, we've already dealt with 8.5, so any notices of rescission, councillors? No? No? All right, we'll move on to foreshadowed items. Nope. Any urgent business? No. And as we have no confidential items tonight, I'd like to thank those watching on the live stream and to those of you who are still here in the gallery for your interest in our council's matters. I wish you all a good night, and this council meeting is closed at 10:37 p.m. Thanks, everyone.